Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Karen Buckley. Karen Buckley, a 24-year-old student, went missing after a night out with friends at a nightclub on April 11th. Born in 1991 in Cork, Ireland, Karen was the youngest child and only daughter of John and Marion Buckley. Growing up, Karen was known for her kind and caring nature, always willing to lend a helping hand. This trait greatly influenced her career choices. After graduating from St. Mary's Secondary School in Mallow, Karen pursued a degree in nursing at the University of Limerick. Her interest in occupational therapy eventually led her to Glasgow, where she enrolled in a master's program at Caledonian University. Karen arrived in Glasgow in January 2015 and moved into an apartment with 3 other female students who were also new to the area. On April 11, 2015, Karen and her flatmates went to a nightclub about 2 kilometers from their apartment. They arrived around 11:45 p.m. and had a great time. At about 1 a.m., Karen told her friend she was going to the restroom and would return soon. She took her purse and left her jacket on the table where the group was sitting. Her friends continued to enjoy themselves while Karen was away. After a while, they realized Karen had been gone longer than expected and should have returned by then. However, Karen was nowhere to be found. One of her friends searched the club for her but couldn't locate her. Trying to contact her by phone was also unsuccessful. She came with thought maybe Karen had gone home, but it was strange that Karen didn't tell anyone and left her jacket behind. The only explanation they could think of was that Karen might have met someone at the club and left with that person. With this thought in mind, they went to bed. However, when they woke up around noon, Karen's neighbors were surprised to find that she had not returned home. They called and messaged Karen on social media, but she didn't respond. Although they had only known Karen for a few months, they knew that this behavior was out of character for her. Instead of coming up with alternative explanations to reassure themselves, they decided to report her disappearance to the police and inform the Buckley family about what had happened. The Scottish police acted swiftly to find Karen, and her disappearance was publicized in the media. Her parents urged anyone with information to come forward. Meanwhile, detectives reviewed footage from the club's cameras and found evidence of Karen interacting with a mystery man. Within 36 hours, on April 13th, the man was identified as 21-year-old Alexander Pacto and was brought in for questioning. He confirmed that he had met Karen at the club and they had gone to his apartment on Dorchester Avenue, about 3 kilometers away. Alexander also revealed that they had been intimate. Around 4 a.m., Karen decided to leave Alexander's apartment and head home, despite his invitation to stay until morning. Alexander mentioned that during their intimate encounter, Karen accidentally hit her head on the bed corner, resulting in an injury and leaving blood marks on the sheets. The police reacted ambivalently to this information. While Alexander seemed genuinely open, he also appeared to be anticipating and justifying potential evidence that might be discovered in his apartment. On April 13th, a man reported finding a woman's purse to the police. Upon further investigation, it was revealed that the purse was discovered in the park near Alexander's residence, and it belonged to Karen. The purse contained her phone and identification documents. This new evidence lent credibility to Alexander's account of events, suggesting that something might have happened to Karen after she left his apartment. The search for Karen persisted, with hundreds of police officers thoroughly searching parks, forests, bodies of water, and abandoned buildings for any potential clues that could aid in the investigation. At that point, Alexander Pacto was the primary suspect, being the last person to have seen Karen. However, investigators kept his identity confidential and did not disclose any information about him. 2 days after Karen went missing, police entering Alexander's apartment with a search warrant, police were immediately struck by the strong smell of bleach. They also observed that the mattress on the bed was the wrong size. Small, dark red spots were discovered on the bed and in the bathroom, and samples were taken for analysis. Additionally, a toolbox and a large quantity of cleaning supplies were found in the apartment. A police dog trained to detect human remains indicated a potential find near Alexander Pacto's car. While awaiting a search warrant, detectives discovered that Alexander had taken his car to be cleaned the previous day, but the job appeared to have been done poorly. Upon searching the vehicle, investigators found small, dark red spots on the inside of the passenger door and sent samples to the lab for analysis. As the investigation progressed, suspicions mounted that Karen might not be alive, but the search for her continued unabated. After journalists uncovered the suspect's identity, a photo of Alexander Pacto appeared on the front page of a local newspaper the following day. This unexpected move by the press ultimately proved helpful to the investigation. A man recognized Alexander's photo in the newspaper and contacted the police, offering valuable information. He claimed to have worked with Alexander in the past and revealed that Alexander rented a warehouse on a farm outside Glasgow. This farm was approximately 9 kilometers from Alexander's apartment. The police pursued every lead and investigated this new information. The farm owner verified that Alexander indeed rented a storage space from him for £10 a week. Upon inspection of the storage space, the police discovered a 200-liter drum containing Karen's body, which had been dissolved in caustic soda, a highly corrosive alkaline substance capable of breaking down organic materials. They also found a bonfire with remnants of a mattress that Pacto had attempted to burn. On the same day, April 15th, the suspect in Karen Buckley's case was arrested. Faced with substantial evidence, Alexander admitted to taking Karen's life, but claimed it was in self-defense. Police reconstructed a timeline of events based on evidence and Alexander's testimony. On the night of April 11th to 12th, Karen left the club around 1 a.m. The reason for her departure remains unclear. Her friends reported no argument, stating Karen said she was going to the bathroom and would return. It is also unclear why Karen left her jacket behind, even if she had decided to go home. Officers investigating the case reviewed 1,900 hours of surveillance footage. One recording showed Karen encountering Alexander after leaving a club. They walked together towards his car, where it's believed he offered to drive her home. However, once inside the car, Alexander attacked Karen. He struck her 14 times on the head with a large wrench, resulting in her death. Investigators found dark red stains in the car, bathroom, and on Alexander's bed, later confirmed as Karen's dried blood. After disposing of her body, Alexander planned his next moves, starting with getting rid of Karen's purse, which was later recovered and given to the police. Around 2 a.m., he returned home and did something that shocked the detectives. He took the Karen out of the car and carried it into his apartment. Later, at 8 a.m., he used his phone to search online for information about caustic soda. He then visited a shopping center where he purchased 6 liters of caustic soda, a respirator mask, and gloves at 9:42 a.m. To get rid of Karen's body, Alexander realized 6 liters of caustic soda wouldn't be enough. He bought more from another store on his way home and put the body in the bathtub. However, since his neighbor would return home around 8 p.m. and he wouldn't have enough time, he wrapped the body in a blanket and hid it in his bedroom. The next day, April 13th, Alexander threw a wrench into the River Clyde, later found by divers. He then visited a nearby shopping center, about 1.5 miles away, where he sought a consultant's advice on a product that could remove bloodstains from a mattress. He also purchased 2 padlocks that day. He took Karen's belongings to a farm and burned them. Then, he bought a barrel and took it to a rented warehouse. There, he poured in caustic soda and locked the gate with 2 new padlocks. Later that day, at 6 p.m., police visited his home and took him in for questioning. Alexander confessed to his crime, but his motive was unclear. He claimed he killed Karen in self-defense during a car argument, but investigators did not believe him. They thought he was trying to justify his actions. Police suspected that Alexander killed Karen to cover up another crime and then got rid of her body. However, the body was too decomposed to determine if Karen had suffered violence before dying. In September 2015, Alexander Pacto was found guilty and given a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 23 years. Through his lawyer, he apologized to Karen's family and expressed remorse. Alexander told his lawyer that he was too drunk on the night of the incident to remember why he killed Karen. If he had not pleaded guilty, he would have been eligible for parole in 25 years instead of 23. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Lisa Valdez. Lisa Valdez was born on September 6, 1961, in San Francisco, California. She grew up with her mother and brother. Lisa and her mother had an exceptionally close relationship, rarely arguing. As a teenager, Lisa developed a passion for dance and an interest in modern technology. She was an early adopter of emerging technologies, including email, which was still a novelty at the time. This interest in technology would later shape her career path. After graduating from college, Lisa found a job as a software analyst in San Francisco. Her mother then used her savings to buy Lisa an apartment in a desirable neighborhood. Lisa lived alone in the apartment, progressing her career and spending time with her family whenever possible. She also continued to pursue her passion for dance. On May 16, 1998, Lisa, then 36, hosted her mother and some family friends at her apartment for the evening. After the guests departed, her mother helped with the dishes before heading home. Before leaving, Lisa promised to call her mother the next day, but the call never came. Initially, her mother assumed Lisa was simply busy. Since Lisa had dance practice scheduled for the next day, her mother decided to wait. However, the entire day passed without any word from Lisa. After trying unsuccessfully to contact Lisa for several days, Lisa's mother began to worry. When Lisa did not show up for work on Monday, her co-workers called her mother to express their concern. The mother immediately decided to go to Lisa's apartment complex. When Lisa's mother arrived at her home, she saw a group of police officers. Lisa's mother approached the police to ask what was going on and was told that residents had reported a strange smell coming from one of the apartments. The apartment manager investigated, found the door unlocked, and called the police after discovering a body on the floor. Police quickly identified the victim as Lisa. Her body showed signs of trauma, making it clear she had been murdered. The advanced state of decomposition suggested that Lisa had been dead for several days. The police suspected that Lisa had been assaulted due to the presence of her underwear next to her body. The crime scene was marked by extensive blood stains on the floor and bed, with the TV and air conditioner still on. However, the disarray of the apartment was later found to be consistent with Lisa's usual living habits. There was no indication of a robbery, as all of Lisa's valuables, including jewelry, were left untouched. The only missing items were her keys and a gym bag. A peculiar detail was the discovery that the attacker had cut off some of Lisa's hair and taken it with them. Detectives believed that the killer may have known Lisa personally. This theory was supported by the lack of forced entry into the apartment complex, which was secured by a fence and required a key or resident approval for access. Police investigating Lisa's murder began by interviewing her neighbors. Their first lead came when a neighbor mentioned discovering a bent metal door frame and faint blood stains on her door 2 days before Lisa's body was discovered. The neighbor had previously reported the incident to the building's management, but they had not notified the police. Police are certain that Lisa's murder was linked to a break-in at her neighbor's apartment. It is possible that the person trying to break into her neighbor's apartment was seen by Lisa and killed her, but another theory is that the break-in may have occurred after Lisa was murdered. Police also interviewed the person who cleaned Lisa's apartment weekly. She said that 2 days before Lisa's body was found, she tried to open the apartment door with her key but found it locked from the inside. When she looked through the door, she saw a naked woman lying on the floor and a male voice talking. Assuming it was a private situation, the cleaner quickly left without doing anything. Police suspected Lisa was dead when the cleaner heard a man's voice. And it was her killer, who was still in the apartment. The cleaner also reported seeing a black Ziploc bag near the body. An envelope containing cash was found taped to the inside of Lisa's apartment door. The money was for the cleaner, as Lisa always left it with her the day before cleaning. The presence of the envelope suggests that Lisa was likely attacked after her mother left, sometime between midnight and early morning. Neighbors who lived downstairs reported hearing a loud noise coming from upstairs on the night of the attack, followed by someone coming down the stairs. Although they did not see who it was, the neighbors' accounts provided a timeline of events. Police continued to search Lisa's apartment for clues while medical professionals examined her body. Forensic analysis revealed that a fingerprint on the toilet seat did not belong to Lisa. In an attempt to identify the fingerprint, the police collected fingerprints from all of Lisa's friends and family members, but none of them matched the mystery fingerprint. Detectives therefore suspected that the mystery fingerprint might belong to Lisa's killer. Medical examiners released their report, shedding new light on the case. Lisa's body showed more than 20 stab wounds, but the advanced decomposition made it difficult to determine if she had been sexually assaulted. The medical team also discovered skin particles under Lisa's nails, which were likely to have come from her attacker, and sent them to the lab for analysis. One of the pillowcases showed multiple blood stains, which upon analysis were found to be a mixture of Lisa's blood and another person's. The police sent the blood stains to the laboratory for further testing. Police believe the killer may have accidentally injured himself when stabbing Lisa. At the scene, they discovered 2 bandages from a first aid kit in the toilet, which the killer may have used to bandage his wound. Additionally, the killer may have left fingerprints on the toilet seat when discarding the bandages. DNA analysis revealed that the blood on the pillowcase belonged to a man whose DNA was not in the FBI database. Furthermore, the skin particles found under Lisa's fingernails and the blood on her knee were from the same person. Although the DNA did not match anyone in the database, detectives now had a DNA profile of the killer. The police compared the DNA evidence with samples from criminals in the area. They also began to scrutinize Lisa's acquaintances. Lisa's mother mentioned that Lisa had met a man named Albert Ketto and that they had planned to go on a date the day after the murder. However, Albert Ketto had canceled their plans just days before. Police brought Albert Ketto in for questioning and noticed a large cut on his hand. Police considered Albert Ketto a potential suspect. However, Albert Ketto denied any involvement in the crime. Police collected Albert Ketto's fingerprints and DNA samples for further analysis. However, the test results showed that none of Albert Ketto's samples matched the blood found on the pillowcase. Additionally, the skin particles under Lisa's fingernails belonged to someone else. This new information led investigators to expand their search for other suspects. Police decided to look at messages left on Lisa's answering machine in the days before she was killed. Police compiled a list of 40 callers but discovered one unusual message. It came from a man who had called Lisa just hours before the murder. He left a message saying, "You know how it goes. Hey Lisa, are you home?" When police played the message to Lisa's friend, the friend recognized the voice as Albert Robinson, a co-worker of Lisa's. Lisa and Albert Robinson worked together. However, Albert Robinson had expressed romantic feelings for Lisa, but she did not return his feelings. Albert Robinson appeared at Lisa's memorial service a few days after the murder. Albert Robinson claimed that he and Lisa were in love, saying that they planned to get married and start a family. However, Lisa's friends and mother objected to this. Lisa told them that she had no feelings for Albert Robinson and that the relationship between the two was just friends. During questioning, Albert Robinson denied any involvement in Lisa's murder, claiming that he loved Lisa and would never hurt her. However, he refused to provide DNA and fingerprint samples to the police, which aroused suspicion and made him the prime suspect. Police obtained a search warrant for Albert Robinson's home, where they discovered something unusual. Albert Robinson's home contained many photos of Lisa. However, despite the evidence, he continued to deny his involvement. He cooperated by providing his fingerprints and DNA samples to the police. However, they were surprised when Albert Robinson's test results did not match the samples collected at Lisa's apartment. Police eliminated Albert Robinson as a suspect. Due to lack of evidence, the case remained unsolved for many years. The investigation continues, with police waiting for the suspect's DNA or fingerprints to be matched in a database. Over the years, Lisa's mother has used social media platforms to plead for information. But the police have yet to uncover any new clues, leaving the case even more unsolved. In 2010, the FBI used new DNA technology to identify suspects by matching their DNA to relatives in a database. This method was limited to close relatives. On September 2nd, police received the call from the FBI with the news. Although the FBI did not compare the DNA to possible relatives in the database, they did retest the original DNA sample as part of the process. Amazingly, 13 years after the murder, the retested DNA sample was a perfect match. DNA from blood and skin particles found under Lisa's fingernails matched a 52-year-old man named Anthony Hughes, whose DNA had recently been added to the FBI database. Although Anthony had a lengthy criminal record, his DNA was not in the database because he had committed a minor crime. However, a change in California law requires DNA samples from all convicted felons, regardless of the severity of their crimes. As a result, Anthony's DNA was collected after he was arrested for petty theft. The investigation revealed that Anthony's fingerprints were also on file and matched those found on the toilet seat in Lisa's apartment. Experts were able to identify the specific finger that left the fingerprint. Prior to the arrest, police searched for additional evidence that linked Anthony to the crime. 13 years ago, police reviewed calls to Lisa's phone before she was killed, but they ignored calls made after her death. Recently, police discovered a call made by Anthony to Lisa's phone just one day after her death. He left a message, the content of which seemed normal and did not arouse any suspicion at the time. If the police had investigated Anthony at that time, they would have found his extensive criminal record. When they went through Lisa's belongings, detectives found Anthony's phone number in her address book, indicating that she knew him. After talking to Lisa's friends, the police learned that Lisa had dated Anthony in high school. The police now had all the information they needed to question Anthony. Since Anthony was homeless at the time and had no fixed address, the police approached cautiously to avoid Anthony fleeing. They arrested him under the pretext of investigating a series of robberies in San Francisco, and he surrendered without resistance. Police began asking about a series of robberies, gradually bringing up Anthony's previous convictions. Eventually, police asked him if he knew a woman named Lisa Valdez. He initially denied knowing her, but when shown a photo, he admitted that they had been high school acquaintances. Anthony also claimed that he had not seen Lisa since the late 1980s. The police pressed Anthony for information about his relationship with Lisa. Eventually, the police produced evidence of his DNA found in Lisa's apartment in 1998. Upon hearing this, Anthony burst into tears. Anthony was restrained as he cried and screamed. He was eventually charged with murder, and detectives informed Lisa's family that her killer had been arrested. However, the trial did not begin until 4 years later. During the trial, Anthony initially appeared confident, but as the trial progressed, his pace changed. He began appearing in court with a Bible and wearing a cross. Anthony's lawyer argued that his client was incapable of committing the murder due to a medical condition that weakened his muscles, making movement extremely difficult. Despite the defense's argument, the prosecution presented strong evidence linking Anthony to the crime scene. This included his skin cells found under the Lisa's fingernails, his blood on a pillowcase, and his fingerprint on the toilet seat. Anthony maintained his innocence, claiming he had not seen the Lisa since the late 1980s. The prosecution, on the other hand, proposed a different scenario. They believed Anthony had contacted the Lisa, visited her home, and attempted to engage in intimate relations with her. When she refused, he became enraged and killed her. As part of the crime, he cut off a portion of her hair and took it with him before fleeing the scene. Ultimately, the jury delivered a unanimous verdict, finding Anthony guilty of first-degree murder. However, the prosecution faced challenges in securing a conviction for sexual assault due to the advanced state of the Lisa's decomposition, which made it difficult to gather sufficient evidence. The charges were reduced from first-degree murder to second-degree murder, which carries a lighter sentence. Anthony was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 16 years. Anthony has been in prison since then and continues to maintain his innocence. Anthony will be eligible for parole in 2031 at age 72. However, Anthony's chances of being paroled are slim, as parole boards typically view refusal to plead guilty as a lack of remorse. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jessica Dishon. Jessica Dishon was born on May 2, 1982, in the small town of Shepherdsville, Kentucky. As the eldest of 3 children, Jessica took on significant responsibilities from a young age, helping her parents care for her 2 younger brothers while they worked. At age 15, Jessica started working part-time at a restaurant to save money to buy her first car, a red Pontiac. A few years later, she bought the car she wanted. Despite her job, Jessica excelled in school and began planning to attend college, where she hoped to study accounting. In the fall of 1999, 17-year-old Jessica was about to start her senior year of high school. She had also started dating a boy, which made her very happy. On the morning of Friday, September 10th, Jessica's parents went to work, and her younger brothers caught the bus to school. However, Jessica did not leave for school as planned. Later that day, around noon, Jessica's mother returned home from work and noticed something unusual. Jessica's car was still parked in front of the house. The mother went to Jessica's room, thinking that maybe she had overslept and missed school. But Jessica was not in her bedroom. The mother then considered the possibility that Jessica might have gotten a ride to school from her father, so she called him to ask. However, he told her that he had gone to work alone that morning. Jessica's mother suspected something was wrong with her car, so she took out a spare key to try to start the car. When she approached the car, the driver's door was slightly open, and Jessica's cell phone was lying on the seat with the numbers 9 and 1 displayed on the screen, indicating that she had tried to call 911. Jessica's shoes and keys were found under the front seat, while her textbooks, work clothes, and purse were in the back seat. Jessica's mother was worried about Jessica's safety. It was obvious that she had tried to call for help but was unsuccessful. Furthermore, Jessica could not leave her belongings in the car and leave. Jessica's parents contacted her school, learning that Jessica had not come to class that day. When Jessica's best friend at work called her parents a few hours later, saying that Jessica had not come to work, they became even more worried about Jessica. Jessica's parents immediately contacted the police, but the sheriff downplayed the situation, suggesting that Jessica might have wandered off and would return home on her own. Despite Jessica's parents' pleas, the sheriff refused to open an investigation. Undeterred, Jessica's parents contacted relatives, friends, and acquaintances, but no one had any information about Jessica's whereabouts. They then searched the entire town, scouring the area, but there was no sign of her. The next morning, Jessica's parents returned to the sheriff's office to report that she had not returned home. The sheriff sent 2 officers to check Jessica's car. However, the officers searched the car without wearing gloves, potentially destroying evidence. Furthermore, the officers did not search Jessica's room. Feeling frustrated with the police, Jessica's parents sought the help of the local media, hoping to draw attention to Jessica's disappearance and the police's lack of attention. Jessica's family and friends, led by her father and Uncle Stanley, launched a search for Jessica. They also distributed flyers with information about Jessica. Fearing the worst, they focused their search on an area near a river, which was known to be a crime hub. For hours, Jessica's family members thoroughly searched the challenging terrain near the river but couldn't find any sign of Jessica. The next morning, Jessica's parents were at home and their son was playing in the yard. Suddenly, he rushed inside, saying he had heard a faint cry for help that sounded exactly like his sister's voice. Jessica's father immediately grabbed his gun and ran outside to find the source of the screams. At the same time, his brother arrived and joined the search. They quickly noticed smoke coming from the property of their neighbor, 40-year-old David Brooks. As they approached, they saw Brooks undressing on his property. Jessica's father asked Brooks for permission to search his farm, but Brooks refused and told them to leave. This was not the only unusual behavior Brooks displayed. Before Jessica's disappearance, the 2 families had a normal relationship. However, soon after, he would drive slowly past their house, staring at them with an ominous smile. After seeing Brooks burning clothes on their property, Jessica's parents went back to the police, shared their concerns and asked them to come and meet Brooks with the dogs. The police agreed. The dogs were given some of Jessica's clothes to track her scent. They led the police to Brooks's fire pit, but no significant evidence was found. However, the dogs did find black gloves in one of Brooks's sheds that smelled like decomposition. During the search, no concrete evidence was found. Frustrated with the police, Jessica's father contacted the FBI for help. The FBI usually does not get involved in missing persons cases based on the family's request, but this time they decided to investigate immediately. After Jessica's parents presented the case and the family's findings, the FBI opened a full-scale investigation. The FBI proceeded to collect fingerprints from Jessica's room and her car, confiscating all potential evidence for further analysis. Additionally, investigators conducted a comprehensive search of the area using helicopters and volunteers. They thoroughly examined the pond near Jessica's home. The FBI searched Brooks' farm and found a printed photo of Jessica. This discovery led the FBI to strongly suspect Brooks' involvement in her disappearance. They also suspected his 35-year-old brother, Joseph, although despite a thorough search, the FBI found no evidence. Due to lack of incriminating evidence, the investigation focused on searching the surrounding area. 17 days after Jessica went missing, police received a call on September 27th. A woman was driving along a road near the river. Noticing something unusual near a tree, the woman stopped to check and was horrified to see a body. She called the police immediately. When FBI agents arrived, they discovered the body of a young woman who had suffered severe trauma. She was missing several fingers and toes. A rope tied around her leg showed traces of red and silver paint. Additionally, some of her clothing was missing, suggesting that she may have been sexually assaulted, leading the FBI to develop disturbing theories about the murder. Medical experts later confirmed the identity and determined that Jessica had been strangled. Her body also showed extensive bruising. Her limbs and fingers had been separated after death, suggesting that she was still alive when this happened. However, the most disturbing fact was that Jessica had survived for approximately 3 days after she went missing. This meant that the police had the opportunity to rescue her. But unfortunately, they did not take any action to do so. After the body was discovered, the FBI re-interviewed Brooks, who changed his story. He initially said he had seen Jessica near her home, but later said he had not seen her. His alibi was disputed by his wife, and he failed a polygraph test, prompting the FBI to arrest him and proceed to trial. The FBI said the likelihood of a conviction was low due to a lack of concrete evidence. While they had some troubling clues that pointed to his involvement, they were circumstantial and inconclusive. As the trial progressed, detectives continued to search for additional evidence. During a re-examination of Brooks' car, they found a rope similar to the one used to tie Jessica up. However, analysis showed no DNA on the rope. Brooks' trial began in January 2003. His attorney maintained his innocence, citing a lack of evidence. During the trial, it was revealed that investigators had found the victim's missing limbs but had not properly preserved them, causing them to decompose and lose potential evidence. The remaining circumstantial evidence was insufficient to convict, and the jury was unable to reach a unanimous decision, resulting in Brooks' acquittal. Under state law, he could only be brought back if new evidence was discovered. Jessica's parents were devastated by the outcome. The parents also felt that if the police had done their job properly, Jessica might still be alive. Over time, the case went cold and was largely abandoned, leaving the family without closure. In 2012, a new detective, Lynn Hunt, joined the local police department and was tasked with reviewing unsolved cases. Lynn Hunt began by examining the murder case of Jessica. However, she was shocked to find that the original investigation was poorly handled, with case files containing errors and lacking key information from interviews with relevant parties. The evidence was also not properly documented, forcing Lynn Hunt to start the investigation from scratch 13 years after the crime. Hunt met with Jessica's family and obtained a box of her belongings that had been kept in her car at the time of the murder. One of her brothers, now an adult, had kept the box since the police returned the items to the family. Lynn Hunt was again disappointed by the careless handling of the evidence, as it had not been stored according to protocol. Her efforts paid off when she discovered a crucial document, Brooks' medical examination report, which revealed that Brooks had an IQ of 61, which is considered low. With a low IQ, Brooks may not have fully understood the questions and may have given incomplete answers. All of this led Lynn Hunt to think that this man might not have anything to do with the case. Lynn Hunt began to consider other suspects. Lynn Hunt conducted an extensive review of everyone connected to the case and those living in the surrounding area. This investigation continued until September 2014, nearly 15 years after Jessica's death. A coworker contacted Lynn Hunt with information about an inmate at the Kentucky State Prison who claimed to know who killed Jessica. Lynn Hunt initially dismissed the information as unreliable. Many inmates make up stories to get released early. However, Lynn Hunt verified the information before dismissing it. Lynn Hunt visited the prison and met a man who told her that he had previously shared a cell with another inmate. During conversations, the inmate revealed to him that he was responsible for the murder of Jessica Dishon. The informant revealed that Stanley Dishon, Jessica Dishon's uncle, had a dark secret. According to the informant, Stanley confessed to years of sexual abuse of Jessica while they lived under the same roof. He warned her that if she spoke about the abuse, he would kill her or someone she cared about. When Jessica started dating in the spring of 1999, Stanley became increasingly fearful that she might confide in her boyfriend about the abuse she had suffered at his hands. On September 10, Stanley visited Jessica at her home when she was alone, and he saw her packing her belongings into her car. He approached her and asked her to end her relationship with her boyfriend. However, Jessica refused, threatening to expose Stanley's actions if he did not leave her alone. As Stanley threatened her, causing Jessica to reach for the phone to call 911. Stanley tried to grab her, but she broke free and ran back to her room. Stanley followed her into her room, striking her before binding her with her own sheets. Stanley then dragged her to an abandoned shed not far from where her body would later be discovered. Stanley held Jessica captive for several days, subjecting her to abuse and torture before ultimately killing her. Stanley then placed her body in a visible location near the road and buried the bloody sheets under the shed. Additionally, Stanley removed some of Jessica's limbs in an attempt to mislead the police, making it seem like the murder was the work of drug traffickers. Lynn Hunt was intrigued to discover that this crucial detail about the missing limbs had never been made public. Only Jessica's closest relatives were aware that her body had been mutilated, which meant the informant couldn't have fabricated this information. Furthermore, Stanley claimed to have buried Jessica's shoe under a broken tree near the shed. Determined to verify the informant's story, Lynn Hunt decided to search for buried evidence. With limited resources at the local police department, she enlisted the help of Jessica's brother and other relatives, keeping Stanley's possible guilt a secret. She did not report her suspected evidence to them. On the first day of the search, no clues were found despite searching the areas described by the informant. The next day, Jessica's brother and Lynn Hunt returned to the scene. On the way, they noticed an abandoned barn on the side of the road and decided to search. Inside the barn, they began digging. Their search uncovered a buried bed sheet. Lynn Hunt collected the evidence and rushed to Jessica's home. Since her disappearance, her parents had left her room unchanged, which helped in verifying the evidence. Upon comparison, Lynn Hunt confirmed that the bed sheet was indeed from Jessica's bedding, as it matched the pattern of the other linens and was missing from her bed. Following this discovery, Stanley was arrested and questioned by police. Although he appeared visibly shaken during questioning, he refused to confess to the crime. Stanley was eventually charged with murder and the case went to trial. This news shocked Jessica's father. The murderer he had been searching for was none other than his own brother Stanley Dishon. As the trial progressed, Lynn Hunt dug into Stanley's past to gather more evidence. She knew that he had assaulted Jessica, but her investigation uncovered that several of Stanley's female relatives had come forward to report that he had sexually abused them as children. Stanley would approach his relatives, claiming he was temporarily homeless, and asked to stay at their home. However, when left alone with the young girls in their homes, Stanley would sexually assault them, threatening them to ensure their silence. Based on multiple similar accounts, police deduced that Stanley had been engaging in this behavior for approximately 3 decades. Lynn Hunt knew full well that a conviction for murder would be difficult, given the lack of direct evidence, such as fingerprints or DNA, linking Stanley to the crime. Undeterred, Lynn Hunt continued her investigation and stumbled upon a box of old case files that had not been examined before. As she sifted through the boxes, Lynn Hunt was once again frustrated with the police who had originally handled the case. She noticed a letter dated June 26, 2002. A concerned person had written to the police at the time, recounting a story identical to one Lynn Hunt later heard from an inmate at the Kentucky Penitentiary. In the summer of 2002, Stanley was serving a sentence for assaulting a minor family member. While in prison, he confided in a fellow inmate about killing his niece, Jessica. Unbeknownst to Stanley, his fellow inmate was a police informant who soon wrote a detailed letter to the police investigating the case, exposing the horrific events surrounding Jessica's death. However, police believed Brooks was the prime suspect at the time, causing them to ignore other potential leads. This inaction left Lynn Hunt deeply frustrated, becoming frustrated with the lack of professionalism of his colleagues. If the police had done their job properly, this case could have been solved in 2002. After all these years, Lynn Hunt could only hope that Stanley would finally face justice for his actions at the upcoming trial. The process began in 2015 when Stanley appeared in court, pleading not guilty. Jessica's parents were furious. The prosecution believed that a guilty verdict on the murder charges would be difficult due to a lack of evidence. There were also assault charges against other female family members. The prosecution would need these family members to testify in court, sharing explicit details about Stanley's actions against them. Given these challenges, the prosecution decided to offer Stanley a plea deal. In exchange for dropping the death penalty, Stanley would have to plead guilty to both the assaults on his relatives and Jessica's murder. Ultimately, Stanley accepted the deal and pleaded guilty. Jessica's parents, who wanted the truth, were unhappy with this arrangement, but Stanley remained silent in accordance with the terms of the plea deal. Stanley was sentenced to 20 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Since he was 56 years old at the time of his conviction, he could be released at age 71. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Ryan Poston. Ryan Poston was born on December 30th, 1982 in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky, and grew up with 3 loving sisters. His parents provided him with an adventurous upbringing, allowing him to attend schools in Switzerland and the Philippines. Ryan's good looks, charming features, and charismatic personality made him a standout among his peers. After completing high school, he attended Indiana University, where he excelled in his studies, graduating with honors in 2005 with a triple major in political science, history, and geography. Following in his family's footsteps, Ryan pursued a career in law and enrolled in Salmon P. Chase College of Law at Northern Kentucky University. His ultimate goal was to run a successful law firm, providing fair and competent legal representation to those who couldn't afford high-priced attorneys. After a painful breakup in 2011, Ryan turned to his cousin, Carissa, for support. During this time, he regularly visited her in Lexington, Kentucky, where he met Shayna Hubers, a native of the city. Shayna was a charming and lively individual with a warm personality that drew people to her. Despite their 8-year age difference, their mutual attraction grew stronger with each visit Ryan made to Lexington. As they spent more time together, their connection deepened. Shayna began to spend more weekends in Highland Heights, where Ryan lived, taking care of him and cooking for him. However, their promising future came to a devastating end on October 12, 2012. In a distressing 911 call, Shayna revealed that she had just killed her boyfriend Ryan. She described a harrowing scene of domestic violence that had escalated out of control, claiming that Ryan had attempted to physically abuse her and confronted her with a gun. According to Shayna, she panicked and pulled the trigger, shooting Ryan, and then shot him several more times, believing she was putting him out of his misery. Within minutes of Shayna's call, officers arrived at the scene, responding to the shocking tragedy. When police officers arrived, they told Shayna to come out of the apartment with her hands up. At first, she was hesitant, but she eventually complied. As she walked out, the officers told her to lie down on the ground. Shayna was clearly upset as she followed their instructions. After handcuffing her and putting her in the patrol car, the officers went into the apartment and found Ryan Poston's body on the dining room floor, covered in blood. The crime scene investigators found that the apartment was slightly messy, but nothing out of the ordinary for a 29-year-old man. The investigators learned that Ryan had a concealed carry permit and owned guns, including the Sig Sauer semi-automatic that Shayna used to shoot him. From the evidence, they determined that Ryan was sitting at the table when Shayna shot him. They knew this because of the blood on the table. However, The fact that many items on the table were undisturbed raised doubts about Shayna's story. If there had been a fight, the items would have been disturbed. The investigators searched the apartment thoroughly, while other officers canvassed the neighborhood, looking for additional information. One neighbor, Nikki, provided valuable information to the detective. Nikki knew Shayna well and believed that Ryan didn't return Shayna's dedication to him. According to Nikki, they frequently argued, often disturbing the peace. Months earlier, Nikki recalled an incident where Shayna came to her door in tears, saying she was afraid of Ryan. Shayna claimed that Ryan had picked her up and thrown her down the hallway, injuring her. Nikki encouraged Shayna to report the abuse to the police, but Shayna chose not to. At the police station, detectives took Shayna to an interrogation room to question her about shooting Ryan. Before questioning her, they read her Miranda rights, informing her of her right to an attorney. Shayna exercised this right and requested an attorney. However, she chose to talk to the detectives despite this. When asked about the victim, Shayna replied, "The man I killed," which showed a sense of detachment. She claimed she acted in self-defense, saying Ryan had grabbed her by the throat and thrown her around the apartment. Shayna described the night as surreal and out of body. Later in the interview, she added that Ryan had said mean things to her, taunting her while holding a gun, and that he was under the influence of drugs. Shayna maintained that she shot Ryan because she believed he was going to kick her out of his condo. She said she picked up the gun and shot him once, and then shot him several more times after seeing him twitch. During her confession, Shayna revealed that Ryan was vain and wanted a nose job, so she shot him in the face to grant his wish. During the intense questioning, Shayna revealed her worries about her schoolwork and how having a dead boyfriend would affect her future relationships. She was specifically concerned that no one would want to marry her once they found out she had killed her boyfriend in self-defense. The detective listened to her statement, but ultimately arrested her and charged her with Ryan's murder. Shayna appeared genuinely surprised by her arrest, claiming she had acted in self-defense when she shot him. In 2015, Shayna's trial began, filling the courtroom with anticipation. The prosecutor started by comparing Shayna to Jodi Arias, who had also been accused of murdering her boyfriend, Travis Alexander. The similarities between the two cases added to the tension in the courtroom as everyone waited for the verdict. The prosecutor believed that Shayna was obsessed with her ex-boyfriend Ryan, and that he was all she could think about. Ryan's friends testified that he wanted to end their relationship and was avoiding Shayna's calls and messages. Despite this, Shayna would often show up uninvited at Ryan's condo in Highland Heights. On the night Ryan was murdered, the prosecution presented evidence that he had a date planned with Audrey Bolt, a former beauty queen. The prosecution suggested that Shayna was motivated by jealousy and anger towards Ryan's new love interest. Audrey Bolt testified that Ryan stood her up on the night of the murder. She had no idea he had been shot and killed until later. The prosecution presented evidence that Ryan had told his father he wanted to break up with Shayna, and his father advised him to be kind to her to avoid a messy breakup. However, Ryan and Shayna exchanged texts on the day of the murder, with Ryan telling her he didn't want to see her. Despite this, Shayna showed up at his condo uninvited. The prosecution believed that during an argument, Ryan told Shayna he was done with her and that she could no longer control him. This allegedly enraged Shayna, who then picked up a gun and shot Ryan. The prosecution played a video of Shayna's police interrogation, which they claimed showed her to be a cold-blooded murderer. In the video, Shayna appears carefree and unemotional, which the prosecution argued was inconsistent with someone who had just killed in self-defense. However, this interpretation was open to interpretation by the jury. The defense argued that Ryan was acting erratically and violently on the night of the murder due to drugs he was taking, including anti-anxiety medication and amphetamines. The autopsy results showed that these drugs were present in Ryan's system. The defense claimed that Shayna shot Ryan in self-defense. The evidence suggested that the substances he was using influenced his actions. To support this idea, Shayna's lawyers called an expert in toxicology to testify on her behalf. The expert stated that a combination of anti-anxiety medications and amphetamines could cause someone to become violent and paranoid. The defense presented this expert testimony to create a reasonable explanation for Shayna's actions, questioning whether she had intentionally meant to harm anyone. During Shayna's trial in April 2015, the prosecution became worried that the jury might be swayed by Shayna's self-defense claim, particularly because she was smart, young, and attractive. These fears were alleviated on April 23 when the jury delivered a guilty verdict, convicting Shayna of murdering her boyfriend, Ryan Poston. However, at the sentencing hearing in August 2015, Shayna continued to blame Ryan for his own death, which outraged his friends and family. Shayna claimed she was innocent throughout the trial and refused to take responsibility for her actions, despite the evidence against her. In Kentucky, defendants who are victims of domestic violence may be eligible for reduced parole after serving just 20% of their sentence. However, the judge didn't believe Shayna qualified for this reduced parole, citing that her crime was a premeditated murder. As a result, Shayna was sentenced to 40 years in prison, making her eligible for parole in 17 years, at the age of 41 in 2032. After her sentencing, Shayna appealed for a new trial, which was granted in August 2016. The reason for the appeal was that one of the jurors had a felony conviction, which they had concealed. This violated Kentucky law, as felons are not allowed to serve on juries. In August 2018, Shayna's second trial for Ryan Poston's murder began, 4 months later than expected. Her defense attorney presented opening arguments, stating that during her year-and-a-half relationship with Ryan, Shayna tried her best to make him happy. However, their relationship suffered as a result. The defense attorney claimed that on the night Shayna met Ryan, he was violent toward her, both physically and sexually. This incident had a lasting impact on Shayna, causing her to take several weeks to respond to his messages afterwards. Additionally, the defense team argued that Shayna had a history of trauma, stemming from a sexual assault she experienced in high school. This led to her struggles with alcohol abuse and promiscuity. They claimed that this traumatic experience contributed to her behavior on the night of Ryan's murder. The defense team's strategy was to present a sympathetic portrayal of Shayna, highlighting her troubled past and arguing that she was not responsible for her actions on the night of the murder. They aimed to challenge the prosecution's narrative and convince the jury that her behavior was driven by a combination of factors, including a history of abuse and a toxic relationship with Ryan. Shayna's defense team claimed that she was a victim of domestic violence by Ryan, rather than a cold-blooded killer. They argued that her actions were a result of years of abuse, not driven by revenge or financial gain. The defense pointed out that Ryan constantly belittled Shayna about her weight and breast size, making her feel insecure and inadequate. This, they said, contributed to her low self-esteem. The defense also stated that Shayna and Ryan's sexual relationship was troubled, marked by frequent arguments and frustration on both sides. They claimed that Ryan's desire for a more intimate connection was unfulfilled, leading to a growing rift between them. The defense presented evidence that Shayna had received a treatment to improve her romantic life. They claimed that she got this treatment to address sexual problems in their relationship and strengthen their bond. The defense argued that Ryan's consistent lack of interest and rejection made things worse, causing Shayna to become more and more frustrated and disconnected from him. The defense claimed that Ryan often broke up with Shayna, only to pursue relationships with other women. However, the prosecution clarified that they were not trying to portray Ryan as a perfect partner, but rather as someone who was not abusive. The prosecution argued that Shayna did not kill Ryan in self-defense, but rather because he had finally ended their toxic relationship on the night of the shooting. They believed Ryan had every reason to break up with Shayna, as she continued to harass him even after their previous breakups. Despite Ryan's efforts to end the relationship, Shayna consistently returned. The prosecution saw this as evidence of Shayna's inability to let go of the relationship. A friend of Ryan's testified that this breakup was different, as Ryan had never had the courage to end things with Shayna in person before, implying that this time, the breakup would be permanent. Ryan accused Shayna of trying to hold on to him. To support this claim, the prosecution presented texts where Shayna told her friends that the romantic interactions with Ryan had brought them closer. However, Shayna testified in her own defense, contradicting Ryan's claim. She said that their romantic interactions had actually driven them apart. In a separate text exchange, Shayna asked Ryan for sex, but he declined due to the side effects of his antidepressant medication, which had reduced his libido. Despite these conflicting accounts, Shayna testified that Ryan had forcibly had sex with her. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury again found Shayna guilty of murdering Ryan, despite the contradictory testimonies and evidence. The jury confirmed their original verdict, and during the sentencing hearing, Shayna's mother emotionally addressed the judge, sharing stories of her daughter's remarkable singing talent, which had earned her multiple college scholarships. Through tears, she asked the jury to consider granting Shayna parole, emphasizing that her daughter still had the potential to positively impact others' lives. Shayna's mother made it clear that her plea did not diminish the profound grief and pain experienced by the family of Ryan Poston. Despite her mother's emotional appeal, Shayna was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. According to the sentence, Shayna must serve at least 17 years before becoming eligible for parole in 2032. She is currently serving her sentence at the Kentucky Correctional Institute for Women in Pewee Valley, Kentucky. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Heather Jackson. Heather Jackson, a 23-year-old mother of two, had just found a house on a quiet street near Lake Erie. She was thrilled to have a new place to call home, especially after separating from her husband Wayne and going through a divorce. Despite the challenges they faced as parents, Heather and Wayne were once a happy couple, but their marriage didn't survive the struggles. After the breakup, Heather faced tough times, but she didn't give up. She focused on making her children, 3-year-old Selena and 1-year-old Wayne Jr., happy. On September 8, 2012, Heather's friend Danielle arrived at her house at 2:30 p.m. as they had planned. However, when Danielle knocked on the door, no one answered. She checked all the doors, but they were locked. This was unusual, as Heather would normally let her know if she had to change plans. Danielle's concern grew as she realized Heather and her children were not at home. Danielle tried to reach Heather by calling her mother, Jody, but was unable to get in touch with her that day. Failing that, Danielle contacted all of Heather's friends, but none of them knew her whereabouts. Then Danielle spotted Selena's pacifier on the porch, which made her increasingly anxious. She knew Heather would never leave the house without it. As the hours ticked by with no call from Heather, Jody grew more and more uneasy, her intuition screaming warning signals. She decided to take action and phoned the police, asking them to perform a welfare check. When the officers arrived at the address, they knocked on the door, but received no response. Next, they made their way around the house, peering through the windows, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. With no signs of forced entry or any indication of foul play, they departed. At approximately 7:30 p.m., Thomas Hansen and Dan Reiner, friends of Heather, arrived at her house, having learned that she was missing. They knocked on the front door, but there was no response. Reiner then proceeded to the back porch, forced open the door, and entered the home. Upon entering, they discovered Heather's lifeless body in the bedroom, completely naked, and immediately called the emergency services. Sergeant Eric Gray Bill, a police officer with the Sandusky Force, responded to the call and entered Heather Jackson's home. He found Heather's body awkwardly positioned between the box spring and mattress in her bedroom, with a ligature constricting her neck. Notably, the TV in the house was still operational, but the children were absent. Their room was empty. While inspecting the house, the officers came across a door to a utility closet that they hadn't checked yet. Upon opening it, Sergeant Eric Gray Bill was met with a horrific sight. Stacked boxes, and behind them, the lifeless bodies of Heather's children. The police immediately sealed off the area, treating it as a crime scene. The local officers were left stunned, having never encountered anything so heinous in their careers. The brutal murder of innocent children left them struggling to comprehend how someone could commit such an atrocity. The forensic examination results only added to the devastation felt by Heather's family and friends. According to court documents, Dr. Diana Scala Barnett, the deputy coroner for Lucas County, performed autopsies on the 3 victims. She determined that Heather Jackson's cause of death was ligature strangulation and observed that Heather's rectum was found to be more open than usual after death. Dr. Scala Barnett attributed this to the likely introduction of an object into the rectum around the time of death, which kept it in that state. Dr. Scala Barnett also testified that Wayne Jackson and Selena Jackson died from ligature strangulation. She noted that Selena's underwear had been rolled up, suggesting that the body had been redressed. Furthermore, Selena's rectum showed a similar dilation to her mother's, again indicating that an object was present in her rectum at or around the time of death. Julie Cox, a forensic scientist at the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, reported that the anal swabs taken from Selena Jackson contained seminal fluid. Cox also observed a suspicious stain on Selena Jackson's underwear, which she excised and tested, finding it to contain a sperm cell. The police were under pressure to swiftly identify and apprehend the culprit behind these heinous crimes. Heather's residence was conveniently located near Firelands Regional Medical Center, and investigators believed that surveillance footage from the building's CCTV cameras might aid in their search for the perpetrator. Upon reviewing the footage, they spotted a car pulling up to Heather's house at 10:57 p.m. However, the camera's distance from the house and the darkness hindered visibility. The car's headlights provided the only clues, revealing that the vehicle had backed into the driveway and remained stationary for some time. 11 minutes later, at 11:08 p.m., the headlights flickered back to life, and the driver departed the scene. Thomas Hansen and Dan Reiner, the 2 men who found Heather's body, were taken to the police station for questioning. Dan, who had been friends with Heather, was the first to be interrogated. He explained that when he learned Heather was missing, he went to her house to check on her. Dan admitted that he had to push the door hard to gain entry, and as a result, the police asked him to provide DNA samples. He consented, and a swab was taken from his mouth. After that, he was released. Next, the investigators questioned Thomas Hansen. He revealed that he had spoken to Heather over the phone the previous night and was near her house around 11 p.m. According to Thomas, he drove up to Heather's house but didn't enter. They chatted briefly outside, and then he drove home. This information helped the investigators identify the car seen on the CCTV footage as belonging to Thomas. Thomas also claimed that he didn't enter Heather's house that night because she wasn't alone. There was a man, known to him as Josh, inside with her. Hansen's statement echoed Reiner's. He claimed that upon learning of Heather's disappearance, he rushed to her house to investigate. After providing a DNA sample, he was released by the police. The police shifted their focus to Josh, who was at Heather's house shortly before her death. They quickly determined his whereabouts and brought him in for questioning. Josh acknowledged having known Heather for several years. He confessed to being at her house that night, stating that they watched TV while the kids slept in their room. He also mentioned visiting the store to buy breakfast for the children, returning to the house and staying for a while, before a friend picked him up around 1 a.m. Notably, Josh admitted to having consensual, intimate contact with Heather. The investigators visited the store where Josh claimed to have purchased breakfast for the kids and reviewed the CCTV footage. The footage confirmed Josh's alibi, showing him entering the store at 11:20 p.m. However, this did not rule out the possibility that he was involved in the crime. As the last known person to have contact with Heather, Josh remained the prime suspect. Josh also provided a DNA sample, which was analyzed along with those of Thomas Hansen and Dan Reiner. The lab results cleared Hansen and Reiner, as their DNA did not match the DNA found on the victims' bodies. Josh's DNA, on the other hand, matched the DNA found on Heather's body, but not on her children's bodies. This indicated that there was another man present in the house that night. Josh had previously confessed to being in a romantic relationship with Heather, which accounted for his DNA being present on her body. However, the police were now tasked with identifying a different individual whose DNA matched the DNA found on the bodies of all three victims. The investigators quickly ruled out Heather's husband Wayne, who was in the process of divorcing her, as a suspect because he lived in a different state. The detectives then focused on Heather's cell phone records, hoping to find some answers. Upon receiving the report, they discovered that Heather had been very active on her phone, right up until the night of her death. Her last phone conversation took place at 3:12 a.m. and lasted 30 seconds. The police now needed to identify the owner of the phone number she had called. 36 hours after Heather's death, the police obtained additional CCTV footage. While analyzing it, the investigators noticed a white car pulling up to her house at around 3 a.m. This coincided with the time Heather stopped using her phone, which might not have been a coincidence. The officers also saw that the white car drove away about an hour later, around the time when Heather, Selena, and Wayne were likely already dead. Although the footage quality was poor and didn't allow the police to see the license plates, they were able to determine that the car was a Cadillac. Once the investigators received information from the phone company about the owner of the phone number Heather had called, they had a lead. The number belonged to 41-year-old Curtis Clinton. It was with him that Heather had her 30-second phone conversation at 3:12 a.m. Curtis Clinton's background check revealed alarming details. Police records showed that Clinton was released from prison in February after serving a 13-year sentence for 2 counts of felonious assault and involuntary manslaughter. He had pleaded guilty to the 1997 murder of 18-year-old Misty Keckler from Fostoria, who was found strangled, naked, and bound in a bathtub. The similarity to Heather's case, combined with the fact that Clinton was released from prison just 6 months prior to Heather and her children's death, raised concerns among investigators. It seemed possible that Clinton had reverted to his previous violent behavior. Furthermore, Clinton owned a white Cadillac, which made him the prime suspect. The police urgently needed to locate him to prevent any further harm. If Clinton was indeed responsible for the murders, he had to be stopped before he could harm anyone else. The police went to Clinton's last known address, but he was not there. A few hours later, a patrol officer found a white Cadillac on a nearby street, but Clinton himself was still missing. A search of the vehicle revealed a receipt from a gas station on the night of the crime. The investigators headed to the gas station to review the CCTV footage. On the recordings, they identified Clinton and his distinctive white Cadillac. Despite already knowing that Heather and her children were deceased, Clinton was seen purchasing water and beer, displaying a calm demeanor. Fearing Clinton might flee, the investigators nonetheless soon received a tip that a patient named Curtis Clinton had been admitted to a local hospital. They swiftly arrived at the hospital and apprehended the suspect they were pursuing. Clinton was arrested and taken into custody, but he vehemently denied any involvement in the tragic deaths of Heather Jackson and her children. During questioning, Clinton revealed that he had been in a romantic relationship with Heather for 5 months, providing her with both financial and emotional support to cope with her numerous personal issues. Clinton claimed to have limited knowledge of Heather's children and stated that he last saw Heather on Tuesday, September 6th. He alleged that on that day, he gave her $328 and they engaged in an intimate encounter. The investigator told Clinton that phone records revealed a 3:12 a.m. call with Heather on September 8th. Clinton corrected himself, saying he had gotten his days wrong, and it was actually Friday night or early Saturday morning when he last saw Heather, not Thursday night. According to Clinton, he didn't stay at her house for long, dropping off the money and engaging in intimate contact before leaving. He explained, "I did my thing and left, but couldn't recall what time he got home." Clinton claimed that someone else must have gone to Heather's house after he left. He said that while he was with Heather, she mentioned that somebody had texted or called her, and she seemed irritated. When informed that he was the last person who had contact with Heather, Clinton denied. However, the examination indicated the opposite. The DNA on the bodies of all 3 victims belonged to Curtis Clinton. Therefore, he was arrested and placed in the county jail. Curtis Clinton was charged with multiple counts during the investigation. It also turned out that 6 days before the death of Heather and her children, Curtis Clinton attacked a 17-year-old girl whose identity was not disclosed by the police. He choked her and forced her to have intimate contact with him. When he let her go, she went to the hospital, and the police at the hospital doctors took DNA samples from her body, which also led to Curtis Clinton. Clinton moved for a change of venue, arguing that extensive media coverage had saturated the county at the time of the offenses and was likely to resume once the trial started. The trial court denied the motion for a change of venue, stating that while the pre-trial publicity was extensive and adverse to the defendant, the publicity was not sufficiently prejudicial that readers and viewers could not realistically shut it from sight. The court rejected claims of presumed prejudice, stating that the defendant, Curtis Clinton, did not hesitate to take the lives of Heather, Selena, and Wayne, and that his DNA was found inside Selena's body before she died. Clinton knew he was facing the death penalty, but he did not want to die and therefore did everything to achieve a different outcome in the trial. He even remembered what justice was when allowed to speak before being sentenced for the capital crimes. Clinton neither begged for his life nor apologized to the victim's family. Instead, he lashed out at the prosecutor, Kevin Baxter, and vowed he would win on appeal and have his case retried. He stated, "I don't respect the prosecutor, and as I said, I will be back again. I know there's a lot of people who are upset here, but I'm the one who's going through this." This statement triggered a disgusted response from some of the 70 people present at the hearing in November 2013. Curtis Clinton was given the death penalty for the murders of Heather Jackson and her 2 young children. When he learned he would be executed by lethal injection, Clinton became violent towards Heather's brother, who expressed a preference for Clinton to die in prison at the hands of other inmates. Deputies and court staff restrained Clinton, who was handcuffed, and pushed him into a chair, while other officers restrained Heather's brother as they exchanged profanities in a packed Erie County courtroom. Heather's brother was angry, stating that the only thing Clinton should be grateful for is that his life was spared by being placed on death row, and that he wished Clinton had been given a life sentence in prison, allowing his friends to harm him. The judge also sentenced Clinton to life in prison without parole for the murder of 3-year-old Selena, and an additional 10 years in prison for assaulting a 17-year-old girl 6 days before the murder of Heather and her children. In 2018, the Ohio Supreme Court postponed Curtis Clinton's execution, which was scheduled for September 15, 2021, pending the exhaustion of all state post-conviction proceedings, including any appeals. As of now, Curtis Clinton remains on death row, and his sentence has been upheld, but his execution will not take place in the near future. Ohio is currently holding over 100 inmates on death row, but Governor Mike DeWine is doubtful that any of them will be executed in the remaining 3 years of his term. The last execution in the state took place on July 18, 2018, and since then, Ohio has had an effective halt on capital punishment. According to Governor DeWine, the reason for this is that lethal injection is the only approved method of execution in Ohio. But pharmaceutical companies have threatened to retaliate if the state uses their products for this purpose. This would have a significant impact on the state's health department and other agencies. The governor has told the state legislature that the only way to resume executions is to change the law to permit alternative methods of execution. But so far, the legislature has not taken any action, and DeWine does not expect them to do so. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kaylee Mandadi. Kaylee Anita Mandadi was born on August 26, 1998, in Webster to Tak Mandadi and Allison Steele. The family was well off, with Allison being a scientist and Tak working as an international executive director at MGM Resorts. After her parents divorced, Allison remarried NASA engineer Lawrence Butin, who lived in Houston. Despite her parents' separation, Kaylee maintained a strong relationship with her father, regularly communicating with him. Her stepfather also adored Kaylee and became like a second dad to her. Kaylee was not only a grateful and loving daughter and granddaughter, but also an excellent student, team member, sister, and friend, known for her infectious laughter and kind heart that could light up any room. Kaylee excelled academically and was actively involved in various extracurricular activities in school, including horseback riding, piano playing, and theater performances. She was also a dedicated Girl Scout and enjoyed spending time with her friends and family, whether it was hiking with her parents or running around the neighborhood. After graduating with honors from Clear Creek High School in League City, Texas, in 2016, Kaylee went on to study communications at Trinity University in San Antonio. With her dark hair and radiant beauty, she quickly became popular among her peers, leading the football team's cheerleading squad and making many friends. Kaylee was always eager to try new and exciting things, from exploring uncharted territories to participating in extreme sports. Her love for animals led her to volunteer with an animal therapy group, where she found joy in helping others. During a football game, Kaylee met Mark Houghton, a 22-year-old athlete and professional baseball player. At first, she didn't notice him as she was already smitten with someone else. However, Mark was immediately captivated by her charisma and striking features, particularly her large black eyes. Mark and Kaylee's first 2 meetings didn't go smoothly, but Mark didn't give up. By September 2017, they had officially started dating. From the start, their friends and acquaintances thought they were a mismatched pair because they were both emotional and had short tempers. Their relationship was lacking in compromise and was characterized by heated arguments and confrontations from the beginning. The young couple's passion often turned to jealousy, leading to frequent quarrels. Friends who witnessed their relationship reported that Kaylee often had bruises on her arms and legs. A close friend shared a particularly disturbing incident in which Kaylee was too afraid to retrieve her phone from Mark and asked the friend to do it for her. Things eventually escalated to a frightening point where Mark became aggressive, threatened violence, and even pulled out a gun. Kaylee was aware that her boyfriend Mark had a jealous temper, and their loud arguments were frequent. Although she never wanted their fights to be public knowledge, she acknowledged that she wasn't blameless in their disputes. However, on September 24, 2017, her roommates intervened, calling the police around 1 a.m. after hearing loud noises and Mark yelling threats from Kaylee's room. When the police arrived, they found Mark alone in the room. Kaylee refused to press charges, downplaying the incident as just a lover's quarrel. Nevertheless, her friends suspected that Mark's anger issues were fueled by substance abuse and reported his violent threats, including an incident where he threatened to throw Kaylee off a balcony. Despite their tumultuous relationship, Mark and Kaylee had moments of deep love and affection. However, their bliss was short-lived, as their argument at the Malaluna Music Festival in San Antonio on October 29th, triggered by the unexpected appearance of Kaylee's ex-boyfriend, demonstrated. The fight was so intense that they left the festival early. Mark's black Mercedes arrived at a hospital 6 hours after their friends last saw them. He rushed out of the car, frantically waving and calling for help. In the front seat, medical staff found an unconscious, semi-nude girl. The car was in disarray, with Kaylee's clothes scattered around. She was slumped forward, resembling a lifeless doll. The medical staff rushed Kaylee to the emergency room on a stretcher. Mark told them they had taken illegal substances before attending the festival, which helped doctors treat her for a possible overdose. She was later transferred to a medical facility in Kyle, Texas, where a nurse specializing in intimate assault cases examined her and found additional bruises on her arms, legs, and ear. The autopsy revealed that Kaylee died from blunt force trauma to her face and head, indicating she was a victim of a deadly attack. The police then launched an investigation to find her killer. Mark became the main suspect since he was the last person seen with Kaylee that night. Although there was no concrete evidence linking him to the crime, Mark's behavior during police interviews raised suspicions. He changed his story multiple times, contradicting his initial account. Surveillance footage also showed him and Kaylee at locations he had previously denied being at. Additionally, interviews with Kaylee's friends and family revealed a history of aggressive behavior towards her, with one of her sisters even admitting to being terrified of him. Kaylee's mother, Allison Steele, has filed a lawsuit against Trinity University, accusing the institution of failing to protect her daughter from Mark's attacks. The lawsuit, filed in Becker County District Court, also names Mark Houghton as a defendant. It claims that Mark's assault led to Kaylee's death, motivated by jealousy. The lawsuit alleges that Trinity University's staff, administration, and campus police were aware of Mark's erratic behavior during his relationship with Kaylee. Despite this, the university took no action to protect Kaylee in the weeks leading up to her death, even though Mark had threatened to break her face or cause her serious harm. A Trinity University spokesperson declined to comment on the lawsuit's allegations, citing the ongoing legal process. Mark was banned from campus for a year due to an incident in his dorm room, but he repeatedly violated the ban. During investigations, it was discovered that Mark had a history of violent behavior towards his girlfriend, Kay, including threatening to harm her sisters and others. Her sisters reported that Mark had threatened to throw one sister off a balcony and shoot her ex-boyfriend's brothers. Mark had an arrest warrant issued against him, and he surrendered in February 2018. He faced multiple charges, including criminal acts, intimate violence, and abduction, but pleaded not guilty. The trial regarding Kaylee Mandadi's death began in December 2019. Prosecutors argued that Mark's volatile temper led him to fatally assault Kaylee in a fit of rage, causing her severe injuries. They claimed that Mark then waited 6 hours before taking her to the hospital. Mark's defense team suggested that Kaylee's death might have been caused by factors other than Mark's actions, such as the banned substances found in her system, which could have led to a spike in blood pressure or head trauma during intimate activity. Kaylee's mother described her daughter's injuries as extremely severe, comparable to those sustained from a fall from an airplane. The injuries covered her entire body, from her head to her toes, including bruises, red marks, and scratches. The only areas that were not injured were her back and the back of her legs. Dr. Susanna Dana, the forensic pathologist who performed Kaylee's autopsy, presented graphic evidence, including photographs of the victim's injuries. These images revealed a subdural hematoma, a type of bleeding in the brain typically associated with traumatic brain injury on the right side of Kaylee's brain. Dr. Dana testified that Kaylee suffered severe cranial and facial injuries, including a dent in her skull and extensive bruising and trauma to her face. She also found bruises on Kaylee's eyelids, jaws, mouth, gums, lips, and cheeks, as well as hemorrhages in both eyes. Dr. William Anderson disagreed with Dr. Dana's conclusion, stating that the autopsy results were inconsistent with the idea that Kaylee was attacked. Instead, he believed that Kaylee's injuries were more likely caused by a fall and subsequent medical treatment. Defense attorney John Hunter argued that the prosecution lacked concrete evidence to explain what happened to Kaylee on the night in question, and that it was impossible to prove Mark's involvement. He highlighted Kaylee's history of drug use, including her prior treatment for substance dependence at a hospital. Jason Wallach, a professor, testified that Kaylee's blood contained a high level of MDMA, also known as ecstasy or Molly, on the evening of October 29, 2017. The concentration of MDMA in her blood suggested that she could have suffered a minor head injury, which could then be exacerbated by the drug into a life-threatening condition. John Hunter suggested that a drug can affect individuals differently, leading to varying physical reactions, such as increased body temperature or electrolyte imbalance, which can cause loss of consciousness. During the trial, Mark Houghton testified that he and Kaylee Mandadi had an argument and engaged in intimate relations in the car before she passed out. He claimed that their intimacy was consensual and involved rough sex, which included strangling her at her request. However, the origin of the bruises on Kaylee's body remained unclear. Kaylee's mother, Allison, was convinced that Mark Houghton was responsible for her daughter's death. Despite being charged with her murder, Mark Houghton maintained his innocence during the 2019 trial. The defense argued that Kaylee's injuries were caused by hospital staff during resuscitation efforts, which led to a mistrial due to the jury's inability to reach a verdict. The case was presided over by Judge Raymond Angeline in the 144th District Court. Following the mistrial, Bexar County District Attorney Joe Gonzalez expressed disappointment and announced that he would review the case. Kaylee's parents decided to conduct their own investigation, focusing on a small bruise near Kaylee's ear. They believed that Mark Houghton might have hit her head against the car window, causing the bruise. Kaylee's parents collected evidence, including autopsy reports and photos, and obtained 3 affidavits under oath. This led to Mark Houghton's arrest on charges of aggravated intimate assault and criminal mischief. The timeline of events presented in the investigation highlighted Mark Houghton's alleged lies and the evidence that led to his arrest. During the trial, prosecutors portrayed Mark Houghton as a manipulative and controlling boyfriend who constantly called Kaylee and took her phone away. 2 weeks before her death, Mark Houghton pushed Kaylee against a brick wall and trashed her dorm room. Kaylee then asked for space, and Mark Houghton began sending her dozens of messages, threatening to end his life. The couple attended a festival where they argued over Kaylee's ex-boyfriend. Mark Houghton then took Kaylee to a deserted parking lot, where they stayed for over an hour. Prosecutors suggested that it was there that Mark Houghton attacked and killed Kaylee. Kaylee's family thanked the Texas Rangers for their work in bringing criminal charges against Mark Houghton. The prosecution considered presenting a video recorded by Kaylee's parents, but ultimately withdrew it due to potential complications. Mark Houghton was convicted of aggravated assault, causing harm that led to the death of Kaylee Mandadi. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, with a $110,000 fine and restitution to Kaylee's family. He was also barred from contacting over 20 individuals involved in the case. Now over 30 years old, Mark is serving his sentence in Wilsey County Jail, eligible for parole in 2033. Although the conviction brought some closure to Kaylee's family, they felt the sentence was not enough for their loss. In the second trial, Mark faced additional charges, including aggravated assault and criminally negligent homicide. The prosecution presented a more comprehensive case against Mark, but the family was still dissatisfied with the outcome and sought a retrial. Kaylee's tragic story highlights the devastating impact of violence on young people and her family's quest for justice. Despite the conviction, Kaylee's family felt that the verdict did not serve justice for their daughter. In 2019, Kaylee's mother, Allison Steele, successfully lobbied the Texas legislature to expand the missing persons alert system in Texas. She also founded the nonprofit organization Kaylee's Calling, aiming to consolidate missing persons alert systems. Additionally, she established a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing public information about the Clear Alert, an emergency broadcasting alert in Texas for individuals aged 18 to 64. In 2021, Allison filed a civil lawsuit against Trinity University, alleging negligence in protecting her daughter. She claimed that none of Kaylee's guardians were informed that Mark Houghton had trashed her dorm room, giving him continuous access to her and making her vulnerable to manipulation. Despite being acquitted of the charge of ending a life, Mark was found guilty of aggravated assault, causing bodily harm. The family expressed satisfaction with the verdict, feeling relief that the legal proceedings had concluded, allowing them to begin the healing process. Losing a child is an agonizing ordeal, and sadly, it was a heart-wrenching journey that Kaylee's parents had to endure. Allison said they are still completely devastated by the loss of Kaylee, and asked those of faith to pray for her family, friends, and for justice in this matter. On Sunday, September 15, 2019, two fishermen were engaged in their daily work near the aqueduct, the Neuquén province's breakwaters in Argentina. The Lime River was approached by them on the same day. They remained composed until they witnessed something that was beyond their understanding. When the water floated the remains of a young girl's body, specifically limbs and a skull. Frustrated, the fishermen contacted authorities who quickly arrived at the scene. Laura Lopez, a young girl from Platier, was quickly recalled by officers. Had been missing for less than 3 days. Her physical form was not familiar. The police were unsure of her identity and continued their search in the area to discover any indications of the victim's identity. In the same river, they came across a torn-up fabric bag, tights, and shoes. Undergarments. It was evident that the girl had been a victim of sexual assault, not just murder. The police contacted Laura's relatives after finding the clothing and inquired if they knew about it, would be able to spot it. The officers were unaware that the investigation would uncover the truth about the case. The method used to commit the crime was even more gruesome than what had been initially suspected. Platier, Argentina, was the birthplace of Laura Lopez on November 11, 2000. Her elder sisters, Melissa and Demaris, who were 18 years old when she was born, loved her from the first day. Laura's mother passed away when she was only 3 years old, and all 3 siblings were left as orphans, under the care of their father. Despite his initial efforts to provide for the family, the father eventually became addicted to alcoholism. A few years later, despite the challenges she faced, Laura was known for her sweet and loving nature. That's why her sister began referring to her as Cielo, a nickname that everyone who knew her would call her. She was referred to by her. The girl's father was laid off years later, necessitating them to find more work. At 18 years old, Cielo began vending fried pastries during the day. She went to high school in the evening, and during her free time from studying, she spent it doing something else. Ensure the well-being of her nieces and nephews. At the onset of her schooling, she had aspirations of finding a good job to restore her financial stability. A sense of stability has been bestowed upon her family. Unluckily, something took place that prevented this from happening. Cielo and Demaris spent the entire day on September 12, 2019, drinking tea with each other. Demaris finished renovating the house. Her sister joked that she had never made tea like her before. Either way, it's a good thing. It was a pleasant day. Cielo later attended school, where her peers observed something sporadic about the routine. She chose to sit at the back of the class instead of her usual spot and left after 20 minutes, the conclusion of the lesson. A friend greeted Cielo as he returned home at approximately 11:30 p.m. They spent some time conversing, drinking a few drinks and taking selfies for social media. At 3 a.m. they said their goodbyes, and Cielo admitted to feeling tired but having a plan for the future, to go to sleep. A message was sent by Melissa to Lisa the next day, inquiring if she had sought medical attention for her ear issues. She was unresponsive, anxious. Melissa contacted Demarest to inquire about Cielo's presence, which led to concern. The sisters of Cielo. She was nowhere to be found, and her phone was switched off. They contacted the police as they found no evidence of her presence for several hours. They were informed at the police station that they had to wait for 48 hours from the last news item. Cielo was last seen by them before they filed a missing person report. The officers speculated that she might have had a boyfriend, as it was believed to be common. Adolescents encountering a situation. Saturday was characterized by the absence of life to Cielo. The report was only accepted by the police at that point, leading to a search. Sadly, it was already too late. The Lemay River's breakwater area was the location where two fishermen were working on Sunday the 15th. Plodier is just 15 kilometers away from where Cielo calls home. They remained composed until they encountered something that caught their attention. A young girl's body, including limbs and a skull, was said to be found floating in the water. They promptly informed the authorities about this. Upon arrival, the officers observed that the brutality had been extinguished with great force. The body is the subject of discussion. It was apparent that the person in question had a thorough understanding of knives. The search for clues in the area was ongoing, with detectives still searching for any leads. The individual affected. A fabric bag, leggings, and underwear were discovered in the same river, but completely destroyed. They came across 2 rings while conducting their search. Finally, officers searched the riverbed and found a blood-stained knife. Cielo's family was soon referred to by them. Demarest spotted the attire upon her arrival at the location, and without hesitation, she took action. Without hesitation, she confirmed that it was her sister's property. The fishermen discovered Laura Lopez's limbs and skull in the shallow waters downstream from where they accidentally found her. The discovery of a young woman's body in Lemay River was made by firefighters around 11:30 on Monday. It had already been entrusted to the Forensic Expert Corps for examination. The autopsy was performed by Dr. Carlos Gordillo. He ascertained that the death was caused by a severe blow to the head, leading to internal bleeding, a throbbing of the brain. A blow to the back of her head caused her to become unconscious. Cielo endured 2 to 4 hours of agony. She could have survived if she had been treated properly. Furthermore, her arms were found to have bruises, indicating that she had been beaten and had some facial trauma, struggled her way towards the attacker. Cielo's sister's fears were validated by the forensic expert. The discovery of intimate wounds on her body was a clear indication of sexual assault. He also said that the recognizable marks of cuts on her neck, arms, and legs mentioned that the culprit had a history of approaching on kitchen knives. The assailant's lack of medical or anatomical knowledge was emphasized, which further intensified the problem. The roster of suspects. The detectives were unaware of the individual accountable for this terrible crime. After 3:00 a.m. on Friday, they analyzed Cielo's mobile phone and discovered that it was lost. Her contact had been with a man named Alfredo Emilio Escobar, a mechanic by profession. He was 28 years old. He and Cielo were both students in high school, and he had a passion for hunting and fishing, inspiringly enabling him to wield a knife. The distance between the girl's home and his house was 2.5 kilometers and/or 20 blocks, which made it convenient. The reception of signals from the antennas is potent. The girl was contacted by this person 4 times on September 13th at 3.16, 3.22, and 3:36 a.m. The man. At that point, the antennas established that they were both at home. Then both mobiles were activated in the vicinity of the girl's abode. The phone of Cielo headed towards the city center and arrived at Escobar's residence by 5 a.m. The girl's WhatsApp story featured an alien emoji, and her phone was still being tracked down. The man's dwelling was where I found him. At 5:52 a.m., the girl's mobile phone ceased to function. There was no communication from her thereafter. The records also indicated that Escobar had not re-entered his cell phone until 11:05 p.m. the following day. A day that, in China Muerta, where Cielo was hiding, the antenna of a nearby telephone pole detected the phone during this time. Subsequently, the remains were uncovered. Escobar came back home at 12:05 p.m. on September 15th. The video was captured by 13 cameras, which cover both city cameras and private residences. The stores were also examined. 2 individuals whose names were revealed were shown in specific recordings from the early morning of September 13th. The physical features were reminiscent of those of Cielo and Escobar. The young girl's mobile phone was in a state of mobility at the same time. Escobar was the only suspect in this case without a doubt. This man was recognized by one of the agents during the investigation. He reminisced about encountering him on Highway 22 a year ago, which was the way they were crossing to meet up with their families, the towns of New Caen and Plotier. A patrol car was hit by a young man who had been driving at velocities of over 80 kilometers per hour. The hour is a crucial one. He refused to be arrested, and a lawsuit was brought against him. Escobar was on the brink of going to court for that incident, but now the charges were completely different. The situation is distinct and has a greater gravity. At 8:30 a.m. on September 17th, a police patrol was present at the scene, which was roughly 30 meters away from Escobar's residence, had been working diligently. A young man who looked like the suspect was spotted driving away from a Fiat Ducato minibus that they had observed. Exited. He was immediately recognized by the police based on his physical attributes, including his face shape, facial features, and hairstyle. He entered the house and later emerged with 2 adults around 60 years old. The trio got into a vehicle, heading towards Highway 22, without any suspicion. Police chased the vehicle for a while and found it stopped in an area of nowhere. The zone is situated roughly 30 meters away from a bridge that connects New Caen and Cipolletti. The elderly man and Escobar exited the vehicle simultaneously. The police proceeded to ask for identification. Escobar was accompanied by his father and another man, while his mother was in the car. It was evident that they were attempting to escape the city. The young man did not hesitate to undergo the procedure, but was visibly anxious. Shortly after, Escobar was brought to the police station, and his vehicle was seized. Following that, he was subjected to a medical examination. The examination revealed swollen areas on the knuckles of his right hand's fingers, consistent with the use of a punching hand. He sustained cuts and bruises on the palm of his right hand. Cielo's death occurred on the same day as a few days before. These findings led to Escobar being charged with the rape and murder of the girl. Despite his request to remain silent, he was detained in custody for 6 months. There was a fear that he might escape or interfere with the investigation. On September 1st, the first search warrant was issued at the Estrada Street residence, the location where the Escobar family made their home. The property was sizable, incorporating a construction site and 2 buildings in the back. Upon entering the sleeping area where Escobar was present, officers discovered fingerprints on the walls. The use of luminol to check them resulted in the discovery of bloodstains. A cloth stained with blood was also found by officers during the search. The situation worsened as they walked to the building that was behind the residence. Crumpled vegetation was found to have blood spots. Blood was also present on the gates, the right handle of a cart, and on one end of an infrared emitting device. A device. It was in this place that the blow that caused Cielo's death occurred, as could be seen. The search team found bloodstains at the location and then examined samples for comparison. The blood of the girl and Escobar was present. The fluid found on Cielo's body was also examined through DNA analysis. The lawyer representing Escobar stated that rape charges should not be brought up until the outcome is determined. We were seized. Nonetheless, the outcomes were achieved in a short time frame. The Ministry of Health Central Laboratory scrutinized the samples collected during the outbreak. The victim and accused's genetic profiles are matched in the search. At the time of his arrest, Escobar was wearing sneakers and a knife was discovered at the river's bottom. They were also examined. Cielo was found to have DNA matching on both items. The victim's genital area was examined using 3 swabs. Escobar's DNA was compatible with one of them. As a result, investigators could already be certain that this individual had sexually assaulted the victim. The girl was killed, dismembered, and disposed of the corpse. The confirmation was made by law enforcement officials during a press conference on September 21st. Prosecutor Juan Agustin Garcia said he believed Escobar was guilty of the crime. He accused Cielo of murdering him to cover up his rape and stated that he could be prosecuted in the event of a guilty verdict, could be sentenced to life in prison. Similar to this, more evidence was still required. Technology played a significant role in Escobar's discovery, even though he did not plead guilty. The court ordered the seizure of his mobile phone, and he was required to furnish the access code. Scrutiny. Despite having Cielo as one of his contacts, it was discovered that he had removed her from the conversation on the night. The disappearance of her. The victim's call history was deleted by him, but their social security number was not removed. Dialogues with the media. The suspect's actions on September 11th, 12, and 13 were also revealed during the investigation. Visited the social media site to check out pictures shared by Cielo. Escobar maintained his innocence despite the evidence against him. Nevertheless, the evidence indicated that he was accountable for the murder. Ultimately, a conclusion was reached concerning the events that transpired on the night of the crime. On September 12, 2019, Cielo departed from school at approximately 8 p.m. After spending time with a friend, she stated that she was tired and would go to sleep. Sleeping is the purpose of this. She was contacted by Escobar at 3:40 in the morning, and they started a conversation. She and him were not friends, but she agreed to meet him, and they went back to his house. The events that occurred inside the house remained unanswered. Nonetheless, the research indicates that Cielo refrained from having personal encounters with Escobar. In a fit of rage, he sexually assaulted her. He took his own life out of fear that she might report him to the authorities. He escorted her to the backyard, hitting her on the head twice. Cielo was alive at that point, and Escobar acted cruelly by hiding her body for several hours. In order to avoid being caught unawares, he also shut down his phone. Cielo's body had been lying in the shed for almost a day, and she passed away due to the injuries. The body was dismembered with a sharp knife that Escobar had hidden in his kitchen. He loaded the body parts into his Fiat Ducato minibus and drove for 15 kilometers to reach his destination, the area where the breakwaters are located. He came back to the location and turned on his phone, feeling relieved and contemplating. The conclusion was reached. This case has become a public concern for the entire city. Neuquén has strongly denounced the accused. The statement made by Escobar's younger sister, who is 23 years old, was the most powerful. She posted a message on her social media profile that addressed both her brother and the victim. The publication was met with a range of responses. Some people sympathized with her situation, while others accused her of complicity. In the midst of these assaults, the girl requested that Cielo and her team remain attentive. Her family is a part of it. Melissa subsequently got in touch with Escobar's sister, expressed her gratitude for the message, and requested an explanation. It's time for people to cease attacking the girl since she has no history of harm. The criminal case was immediately pursued by the prosecution. The initial court proceedings were conducted in the Provincial Legislative Assembly. According to the Neuquén prosecutor, Escobar was fully responsible for his actions. The girl was allegedly killed through gender-based violence, in addition to other charges, the act of rape. In the same hearing, professionals who were involved in the examination of the attire discovered in that case. The river, in conjunction with the remains and evidence found in the man's house, provided their testimony. Testimonies. Florencia, Cielo's closest friend, was the most unexpected. She stated that Escobar had been sending messages to the victim for several months, inviting her to join him, to socialize and enjoy a drink. Despite this, they had never met before. She stated that she had been acquainted with him for 5 years and was aware that he didn't have it. a highly commendable standing. Parties at Escobar's house had been a regular occurrence over the years. The house was strewn with alcohol and psychoactive substances. Intimate liaisons were openly shared by couples. According to Florencia, she had advised her friend against dating Escobar on multiple occasions. The girl consistently replied with a refusal to respond and an inability to reply to his messages. The defense questioned why she had not suggested blocking Escobar's number. In response, Florencia stated that her friend had made the decision and she didn't want to dictate anything. Her life. They exhibited the girl's surveillance camera footage while she was on the stand, the day that Cielo went missing. They exhibited her a recording from EAR at 4 Jower AM, which showed two individuals standing on opposite sides of the screen, individuals heading towards the central district of the city. Florencia reluctantly acknowledged that it was Cielo. She affirmed that her sneakers, jacket, and walking style were unmistakable. The girl also recognized Escobar. The testimony of Escobar's friend exposed his impulsiveness, as the judge accused him of infidelity. His behavior was marked by substance abuse and womanizing tendencies. His ex-partner was also present in court. According to her, their relationship ended in a negative way many years ago. She reported him to the authorities as she believed he had burglarized her home and stolen money. Money. When she reached out to him to ask for the money back, he ran after her friend who was with her. The defendant attempted to defend himself after examining the testimonies. Escobar pointed to his friend, who sold him illegal substances, as the actual offender, the offense committed. That night, I was in a state of unconsciousness. My admission is that I have committed the act of removing blood and discarding it. He stated to the local media that he had not committed murder. According to him, he was intoxicated that evening, and this individual was also under the influence of drugs in his residence with Cielo. After hearing a scream from one of the rooms, Escobar immediately went to investigate had taken place. The blood was visible, and he proceeded to clean it up. He aided his friend in disguising the body. He expressed gratitude towards them for allowing him to share his supposed story at the end. The truth is what matters most. Despite the lack of evidence, this statement was not validated. Escobar was the lone suspect. The prosecutor stated in his closing argument that this man exploited the fact that they betrayed the victim's trust by being somewhat familiar with her. He orchestrated the cruelness of his behavior and the gruesome method of disposing of the remains. Alfredo Emilio Escobar received a unanimous verdict after the jury deliberated for only 40 minutes, convicted of raping and murdering Laura Cielo Lopez, aged 18. The charge that the latter one was brought up was made worse because it was aimed at hiding the attack. The issue of gender violence was a part of it. Due to these reasons, he was given a life sentence with no chance of release. The Cielo Lopez law, which was passed by the Neuquén provincial government, has been in effect since then. Strive to eradicate violence against women. All ages, including students and teachers, are required to receive training on gender violence. Fortunately, he was not forgotten, and a life sentence is reassuring. The victim cannot be brought back to life by involving society and the family, as per Marcelo Henriques, the family's lawyer in Velasco. The conclusion of this harrowing tale is: for the Halbach family, a reminder that nightmares can filter into reality. For Teresa Halbach, October 31st, 2005 was another day at the office. As a freelance photographer working for Auto Trader magazine at the time, she received a call to shoot a few photos at the Abrees Auto Salvage. She was never seen again. First reported as a missing person on November 3rd, 2005, a large-scale search began for Teresa. On the afternoon of November 5th, 2005, her Toyota RAV4 SUV was found partially concealed in Avery's salvage yard. Investigators later discovered blood in the vehicle. Charred bone fragments and teeth were also found in a burn pit on the same property. Her car keys were in the room of the property owner, Stephen Avery. Born on March 22, 1980, Teresa was one of 5 siblings. Her parents, Richard and Karen, raised her on the family dairy farm. When she was 8 years old, her father sadly passed away. Karen eventually remarried Richard's brother Thomas, and together they raised their blended family. Teresa was an outdoorsy girl who aspired to work for National Geographic as a photojournalist. Friends described her as having an uncanny ability to make everyone feel welcomed. She was dedicated to her studies, making summa cum laude with a degree in photography. After graduating from the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay, Teresa continued to work with Pierce Photography, whom she interned with during her college days. She started her own business, Photography by Teresa, and operated out of the Pierce studio. She traveled extensively, and to supplement her income, she took on freelance jobs for Auto Trader magazine, taking pictures of vehicles that were put up for sale. It was this job that led to her untimely death. All the evidence found pointed to one person, Steven Avery. Avery had contacted Teresa to set up an appointment to take pictures of his sister's minivan. According to records, she was last seen at 2:30 p.m. that afternoon. This was later confirmed by Steven's nephew, Bobby, who told police he saw the car enter the salvage yard. Avery was initially charged with a weapons violation as a convicted felon. On November 11, 2005, he was formally charged with the murder of Teresa, kidnapping, sexual assault, and mutilation of a corpse. The blood found in the SUV proved a positive match for Avery's. A set of car keys belonging to Teresa found in Avery's room. All the while, Avery maintained his innocence, alleging the police were trying to frame him. He was in the middle of a civil lawsuit with Manitowoc County for $36 million. Steven Avery, born July 9, 1962, is a Manitowoc County native, raised in Wisconsin alongside his two brothers, Charles and Earl, and sister Barbara by parents Dolores and Alan. He dropped out of high school with reports suggesting he had an IQ of 70. Steven was no stranger to the law. In 1981, he served 10 months in jail following the burglary of a bar. A year later, he pleaded guilty to animal cruelty after pouring gasoline on his pet cat and tossing it into a bonfire. For this, he served another 9 months. In 1985, he threatened his cousin Sharon Morris by forcing her off the road and thereafter pointing a gun at her. He later alleged that he wanted her to stop spreading rumors. She'd filed a report alleging that he exposed himself on several occasions and was masturbating in the front yard. Although he received a 6-year sentence for his crime, he was granted bail and released. However, it was a case of mistaken identity that had him locked away for nearly 2 decades. Penny Bjornston reported that she'd been walking along a beach near Two Rivers when she was attacked and assaulted on July 29, 1985. Police believed the description she gave had a striking resemblance to Avery. She went on to choose his photo during an interview with police and later picked him out during a suspect lineup. He was arrested and charged with the attack on Bjornston. A state-appointed forensic official claimed that a hair found on Avery's shirt was consistent with the victim's. This evidence led to his conviction in December 1985. All this despite a staggering 16 witness testimonies and a time-stamped receipt to prove his whereabouts at the time of the assault. Steven was convicted of rape and attempted murder and sentenced to 32 years in prison. Avery maintained his innocence and appealed in both 1987 and 1996. Both appeals were denied by the higher court. In 2001, though, Steven made contact with the Wisconsin Innocence Project. The organization took on the case, and in 2002, Steven was exonerated after DNA evidence proved he was innocent. It was later learned that another man, Gregory Allen, committed the crime and did, in fact, confess to it in 1995. Deputies alleged that Sheriff Deputy Thomas Kokorek received a call and said, "We already have the right guy, don't concern yourself with it." Allen and Steve bore a striking resemblance. Allen also committed a similar crime in the same area that Bjornston was attacked and was under police surveillance, but he was not considered a suspect. Allen was not even called up as a suspect in the lineup. After 18 years, Steven walked out a free man on September 11, 2003. He then went to file a civil lawsuit against former Sheriff Thomas Kokorek and former District Attorney Dennis Vogel to the tune of $36 million. His freedom, however, wouldn't last long. When Teresa was reported missing, searches were conducted in the salvage yard. This was the place she had last been seen, as confirmed by Stephen's nephew, Bobby Gassi. Stephen claimed that he'd spoken to Teresa when she came by to take the photos, and then she left. Apart from the bone fragments, SUV, car keys, and blood found in the car, a bullet with Teresa's DNA was discovered in the garage. While incarcerated for Teresa's murder, Stephen's lawsuit was settled in February 2006, and he was paid a mere $400,000. While in jail, Stephen's younger nephew, Brendan Dassey, was also questioned in relation to the murder. Brendan, who was 16 years old at the time of the murder, was interrogated by police without parental supervision or a lawyer being present. Brendan confessed to investigators that he and Stephen first assaulted Teresa before murdering her. They then burned her body to destroy evidence.
I go down to put out say, Tereo, Polly, where? Alith, so.
He was charged in March 2006 as an accessory to the murder. He later recanted his statement, claiming that he'd been coerced by detectives. Brendan was charged with the same crimes as Stephen, although there was no physical evidence linking him to the crime scene. Stephen was convicted in March 2007 and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Later that same year, Brendan too was found guilty and given a life sentence with the possibility of parole in 2048. But there was not to be a cut-and-dry solution to the murder. The conviction sparked controversy. It was a sensational case. Stephen was the first of the Innocent Project's 174 exonerated convicts to be charged with a violent crime after being released. This caught the interest of aspiring filmmakers Laura Ricciardi and Moira Demos. Making a Murderer premiered on Netflix in 2015 and created a media maelstrom. The documentary, which took 10 years to research and produce, profiled the case of Steven Avery. The series chronicles the case timeline, beginning with Stephen's wrongful conviction in 1985 and subsequent exoneration, civil lawsuit against the Manitowoc County, and the arrest of Stephen and Brendan in regard to the murder of Teresa Halbach. It received both praise and criticism from critics and those directly involved with Teresa's case. The story caused on an international level has driven to division in public opinion. A petition to have Stephen and Brendan pardoned was drawn up and sent to the White House. It garnered over 128,000 signatures, but still failed to make any impact. The White House stated, as the convictions were made in a state court, the president had no authority to pardon either defendant. There are those who firmly support the innocence of Stephen and Brendan. These include his immediate family, who have supported him and also pray for the real killer of Teresa to be found. Sandy Greenman, Stephen's ex-fiancée, is one such person. Greenman has been his avid supporter, going as far as to start a Facebook page to garner support and give exposure to the case. She described him as a model inmate. Greenman stated that people take a perverse pleasure in tainting Stephen's name. People like to say Steven Avery has been violent all his life, which is not true, she said. Most notably, though, was the support offered by Kim Kardashian. The socialite has been using her influence to advocate for a fair justice system. Having come across the case on a social media site, her interest was piqued. Although she's made appeals to the governor, even her level of influence has no sway. However, she hasn't given up and hopes to seek justice for both Stephen and Brendan. The other half feels Stephen is where he belongs. On that side of the coin is Jody Stokowski, another ex-fiancée. Jody initially pledged her support in Stephen's innocence during the documentary. Afterwards, she alleged that she had lied and it was all an act. Jody went on to explain to Nancy Grace in an interview that he threatened to kill her and her family.
The first thing I want to ask you is, do you believe Steven Avery killed Teresa Halbach? Yes, I do. Why? Because he threatened to kill me and my family and a friend of mine.
He alleged that he wanted revenge on all women after his life was wrongfully stolen from him. Stephen is the one person I can't trust. He's a monster, she said. The show also ignited a debate regarding the perspective covered by the documentary. For the supporters of Stephen and Brendan, they feel the points most significant to the trial were highlighted. Dean Strang, one of Stephen's attorneys, agreed that the documentary covered enough to give the public a chance to judge for themselves. He disagreed that the series was subjective. As for the relatives of Teresa, They say the show saddened them. The Hallbacks stated the show sought to entertain and seek profit from their loss. Teresa's aunt, Kay Giordana, and cousin-in-law, Jeremy Fournier, both stated that the show was one-sided. Former Calumet County District Attorney Ken Krantz alleges he was not given a chance to tell his side of the story. The filmmakers denied this and claimed that he refused to give an interview. In an interview with People magazine, Krantz alleges the documentary has left out key pieces of evidence. These include Stephen using a fake name when calling Teresa, DNA belonging to Stephen was found on the SUV's hood latch, and a ballistics report showed that the bullet found in the garage was fired from a rifle owned by Stephen. Krantz further alleges that prior to her murder, Teresa had once before made a trip to the Avery residence. When Stephen answered the door with only a towel on, she said she wouldn't go back because she was scared of him. In response to criticism from Krantz and other officials, the filmmakers said they'd given prosecutors the opportunity to answer questions. They believed that the documentary was a fair representation of the case and covered the most consequential evidence given during the trial. The documentary had its desired effect. It poked holes into the narrative of Stephen and Brendan's case by exposing allegations of police and prosecutorial misconduct, evidence tampering, and witness coercion. At the outset, Stephen called out the police for trying to frame him. This to avoid the county paying out the $36 million lawsuit he filed. Stephen believed his lawsuit would be undermined if he was convicted of another violent crime. To avoid a conflict of interest, Manitowoc County gave neighboring Calumet County authority over the handling of the case. Part of the deal, however, was that Calumet could use resources which included personnel from Manitowoc. The key in Stephen's room was found by a Manitowoc sheriff's deputy after several searches of the property. Another allegation made was regarding the blood evidence found in the car. Stephen and his defense team believe it was blood used from his prior conviction. Given credence to this scenario were the claims made by the defense. According to the Avery defense team, the vial containing Stephen's blood had been tampered with and a puncture hole was visible on the stopper. The prosecution, however, combated this claim by testing the blood for a preservative not found in fresh human blood and found none. Avery's defense team brought in an expert witness who stated it was not possible to tell if the negative result meant there was none of the preservative present or the technology to test itself was inconclusive. The documentary shone a spotlight on the men who have interrogation with regard to Brendan Dassey. Dassey was just 16 years old during the interrogation. Firstly, he was interviewed without the supervision of a lawyer or parent. It's understood that both he and his mother consented to the interrogation. But what piqued the interest of many was that Brendan had an IQ of 73, classifying him as intellectually challenged. Many have argued that his intellectual disability left him open to suggestion, particularly when it was shown that the Reid technique of interrogation was used. The Reid technique has been criticized for producing high rates of false confessions, especially from juveniles and the mentally impaired. The technique is used to make the suspect comfortable and eventually confess to crimes through familiarity with the interrogators. The interrogator then proceeds to tell the suspect that the evidence shows that the suspect did commit the crime. Dassey allegedly agrees with the interrogators during the interviews, but later recanted his confession. He accused his first defense team of collaborating with the prosecution to get him to confess.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, it's your role. Yeah.
He's also claimed that coercion was used to elicit a confession from them. Both Stephen and Brendan have appealed their convictions, but have been denied innumerable times and remain in prison. The defense teams of both men have exhausted their efforts in trying to get retrials on both men's charges. Following the Making a Murderer documentary and the public outcry regarding Stephen and Brendan's innocence, significant new developments have occurred in both their legal teams. Professors Loring Nyrider and Stephen Dreisen of the Northwestern University Center on Wrongful Convictions of Youth are representing Brendan. They too began with numerous appeals and have come up against many hurdles, but have refused to give up just yet. Meanwhile, Stephen's appointment of Kathleen Zellmer has shaken up the case and given further hits to the prosecution's claims. His previous lawyers, Dean Strang and Jerry Buting, have taken their newfound fame and gone on tour to promote and bring attention to the case of Stephen Avery. Zillner, considered a trailblazing trial lawyer, has been responsible for overturning 19 wrongful convictions. Her dogged determination and careful analysis of cases has seen her uncover missing evidence that helped exonerate her clients. Most recently notable, she was a consultant for Johnny Depp and his defense team during his trial. Zellner hit the ground running once she was appointed to Stephen's defense team and firmly believes her client is innocent. One of the first things she put to rest was the alleged confession of Joseph Evans Jr. Evans alleged he was responsible for killing Teresa and trying to frame Stephen. Zellner stated that it was a not-so-subtle attempt at publicity. Previously, Evans played snitch and allegedly wrote a 9-page letter to media outlets claiming he heard Stephen confess to the murder. This time, though, it seems he wanted in on a portion of reward money to make his life in prison more comfortable. However, his claim is not gaining the traction he expected. In August 2016, Zellner filed a motion demanding new scientific testing be done. Willing to pay for the extensive testing, Zellner intended to use this evidence to prove that Stephen had been framed. The theory was that 3 different burn pits showed evidence of human remains being burned. A particularly significant find was that of a human pelvic bone fragment, a bone that was given to the Halbachs as part of Teresa's remains. This action, claims Zellner, was proof that Teresa's remains were planted in Stephen's burn pit. The defense, however, didn't get the opportunity to test these bones as they were not disclosed to them. This was a Brady violation according to Zellner, meaning that evidence which could have helped exonerate Stephen was not disclosed in the proper manner with regards to the criminal case. Crucial evidence was just out of their reach. Zellner remained relentless in her pursuit for justice. She approached the case with a new angle, one that could potentially point to a new suspect in the case. Being unable to test the bone fragments, Zellner opted for forensic testing of the Dassey family computer. What she found on it was damning. Pornographic images of women in various stages of torture, violent images and videos depicting women as victims. All these images were allegedly accessed at times when Bobby Dassey was at home. Furthermore, Zellner pointed out that Barbara, Bobby, and Brendan's mother, along with Stephen's sister and her husband Stott Tadich, were trying to get rid of evidence that could implicate Bobby. The forensic team were able to download 2,449 pages of data from the computer to a CD-ROM to present as part of the motion for a retrial. On it were all the searches, videos, and photos accessed by Bobby. Bobby is the older brother of Brendan and the nephew of Stephen. He was also the key eyewitness for the prosecution at Stephen's trial. He alleged that he last saw Teresa going to his uncle's house, and when he returned from hunting that afternoon, did not see her or the car again. Added to these claims are the allegations of his half-brother, Brad Dassey. Brad is alleged to have said he believes his uncle is innocent. He also made claims that his stepmother, Barb, and Stephen's brother-in-law, Scott, wiped the computer, deleting all pornographic material. Allegedly, Barb has filed a harassment suit against Brad following a conversation they had about tracing deleted files from a computer, which some believe is, in part, to ensure Brad remains silent about his knowledge. For Bobby, though, the final nail in this coffin could be the evidence that exonerates Stephen, and, in turn, Brendan. An eyewitness has come forward claiming to have seen Bobby being assisted by a much older man, pushing Teresa's SUV back into the salvage yard. Thomas Sawinski stated in a sworn affidavit that he drove by Bobby and the other man while en route to deliver newspapers. When he passed the duo a second time, Bobby allegedly stepped out in front of his car to stop him. Thomas swerved to avoid him and continued on his morning route. He said that Bobby's eyes showed he was not pleased to see him there. Following the discovery of the SUV, Thomas realized the significance of the find and contacted police. He told them everything he'd seen that morning, and their response was, "We already know who did it." He provided his details, but he never heard back from them. For Zellner, this provides a contradiction to the prosecution's key witness. If proven true, which she's confident about, Bobby's testimony would be false. Zellner believes the rejection of all the crucial evidence in favor of Stephen denied him a fair chance to prove his innocence years ago. The newly filed motion is still with the appeals court and is awaiting an opinion or decision to be read over in November 2022. Stephen Avery continues to maintain his innocence. Kathleen Zellner, in her own words, says she represents the wrongfully convicted and added, "If you lie to her, she will find you out." Could Stephen be the scapegoat to a bigger conspiracy? Is this all a conspiracy to discredit Stephen's claim of improper police procedure? Or was there a monster truly hiding within Stephen all these years? Please let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. Ardeth Wood, a stunning 27-year-old, was not only beautiful, but also exceptionally intelligent. She was on the path to earning a doctoral degree in philosophy from Waterloo University while simultaneously working as an editor for a philosophy journal. Ardeth's dream of becoming a professor was about to come true. The summer of 2003 arrived. Ardeth decided to spend her vacation visiting her family in Ottawa, Canada. She had a wonderful time with her loved ones, going on walks together and cooking at home. On the morning of August 6th, the young woman went for a run. When she returned, her thoughtful parents were already waiting for her with a delicious breakfast dessert. It was a warm and sunny day, so Ardeth decided to go for a bike ride. Her brother kindly allowed her to borrow his bicycle. The girl promised to be back in a couple of hours. That day, her mother planned to go shopping before lunch, awaiting her daughter's return from the ride. Ardeth loved cycling along the picturesque route through the forest, past the river and cliffs. This trail was popular among local cyclists. It was always peaceful and safe here, but not this time. 27-year-old Ardeth never came home. Her mother was worried about her, and then a heavy downpour started. The woman understood that her daughter wouldn't be riding in such weather, but time passed, and she still wasn't back. The family set out to search, assuming the girl might have fallen off her bike and needed help. Bike paths wound through the entire city, and they didn't know which direction Ardeth had gone this time, so her relatives searched all over town. Their efforts were fruitless, and when it got dark, they went to the police. Due to the bad weather, the search was postponed until morning. The next day, there was no news about Ardeth. One of the largest search operations in Ottawa's history began. It involved rescuers, police officers, dog handlers with their canines and helicopters. In total, about 1,000 people, including numerous volunteers. Ardeth's family actively participated in the search, posting flyers with the girl's photo all around the city. But the first few days yielded no progress. The police turned to the public for help. Soon, a call came from a local resident. She said that on the day of Ardeth's disappearance, she was in the forest on the bike path and saw a creepy guy with a bicycle there. The witness described him as a young man with a pleasant appearance, well-dressed, but behaving extremely suspiciously. His conduct was frightening. It turned out the stranger had tried to push the girl off her bike and drag her into the bushes. Fortunately, other people appeared on the trail. The perpetrator fell behind, and she managed to escape quickly. After this incident, she no longer felt safe on walks and stopped cycling alone. According to the girl, it happened in an area called Green Creek. She suggested that the stranger might have attacked Ardeth as well. The eyewitness was invited to the police station to create a composite sketch. She described the suspect as a young man, 20, 30 years old, light-skinned, dark-haired with a beard and glasses, pleasant-looking and athletically built. The sketch was shown to Ardeth's family, but they didn't recognize anyone familiar to the missing woman. Many men wore similar glasses and beards at the time, so suspicion could fall on anyone. The investigators decided not to publish the portrait in the media, fearing a wave of false calls. The police constantly asked local residents for help, showing Ardeth's photo. Law enforcement was confident. Such a bright, beautiful girl with a memorable appearance couldn't have gone unnoticed. Someone must have seen her and could provide a lead. This assumption proved true. 16-year-old Laura called the police. She said that on the day of the disappearance, while riding past on her bicycle, she saw Ardeth on the bike trail. The missing woman was sitting on a rock, seemingly resting. When Laura rode further, she heard a scream. Turning around, the girl saw Ardeth arguing with some guy. Laura didn't know what to think. Maybe it was just a lover's quarrel. Ardeth wasn't calling for help, and then she went into the woods with that man. Laura wanted to find out what was happening, but got scared. Seeing the approaching storm, the 16-year-old witness hurried home. As she was leaving, she thought she heard someone screaming. The police invited Laura to the station to show her the composite sketch of the stranger. She recognized him. According to the girl, it all happened around 1 p.m. in the same place, Green Creek. Later, the police received several more calls from girls who had encountered this creepy guy on the trail. He attacked them, but the victims were lucky to escape. One woman's call particularly stood out. She recounted how an attractive stranger approached her during a walk. They had a pleasant conversation, but suddenly his behavior changed drastically. The men started grabbing her, but the woman managed to push the attacker away with her bicycle and quickly flee. She didn't even look back, afraid he would catch up. After returning home, the woman told her family about the incident and warned her loved ones to stay away from that place. Oddly, none of the girls who were attacked reported it to the police. The search for Argeth concentrated around the creek area. Soon, her bicycle was found, indicating the police were on the right track. Meanwhile, the investigators received another call that became a breakthrough in the case. A man, without giving his name, reported an unpleasant incident in the forest. A terrible accident. Allegedly, he didn't want to harm Ardeth or take her life. Confused, he decided to get rid of the body. The stranger carried the girl across the creek, dug a small pit and buried her there, covering the grave with branches. Then he hung up. The police managed to trace the call. It was made from a phone booth 20 minutes away from Ottawa. Law enforcement rushed there, hoping to find witnesses or lift fingerprints or DNA from the receiver. But disappointment awaited them. Someone had thoroughly wiped the handset. Neither eyewitnesses nor surveillance cameras could be found. The search for Ardeth continued in Green Creek. Dogs trained to detect the smell of corpses arrived at the scene. Soon, the worst fears of the family and the police were confirmed. With the help of the dogs, they managed to find the missing woman's grave, located between 2 trees in a quiet, picturesque spot. Coming closer, the detectives saw the half-buried, naked body of the girl. Likely the criminal was startled by someone, which is why he buried the victim so sloppily. Criminologists started examining the crime scene, but, unfortunately, found no evidence, no fingerprints or DNA. The medical examiner confirmed it was Ardeth Wood. She died a horrific, agonizing death that didn't resemble an accident at all, contrary to what the stranger said in his conversation with the police. The cause of death was drowning. Algae were found in her lungs, so the girl was still alive when she ended up in the water. Despite the body being found naked, the medical examiners didn't find unequivocal signs of rape, although they didn't rule it out. The police believed the crime was sexually motivated. In their opinion, the stranger hunted girls in a deserted place for this purpose. Otherwise, what else could have driven him? The detectives needed to catch the criminal urgently to avoid new victims. They were convinced he had attacked several girls and had already killed one. How far could the maniac go? The police decided to publish a composite sketch of the suspect in the media, asking the public for help in identifying him. Investigators received about 4,000 calls with leads and began processing them, which took a lot of time. On September 10th, the police released important information about the suspect. It turned out that the girls who saw the stranger in the forest had noticed one detail. He had an eagle tattoo on his left shoulder. This was a crucial lead that could help track down the criminal. The media published a sketch of the tattoo, after which several calls came to the police. People reported acquaintances with bird tattoos on their faces, necks, or backs. However, this information led nowhere. In April 2004, while processing another batch of calls, investigators came across an important clue. A man claimed he knew the killer. The person lived in the area and was riding a bicycle in the Green Creek vicinity at the time of the crime. The detectives were interested in this information and invited the specified suspect for a conversation. When the guy entered the police station, the investigators were amazed. He matched the criminal's description both in appearance and age. During the conversation, the young man was noticeably nervous. He said he often rode his bike along that trail, not understanding what the issue was. When the police asked him to show his shoulder, An eagle tattoo was found there. It turned out that the man had previously had problems with the law. He became the prime suspect. The interrogation lasted 3 hours. The entire time, the suspect answered questions defiantly and aggressively. He said about himself, "I'm like a scorpion under a rock. You never know what I'm going to do." The guy had no alibi, but couldn't say what he was doing on the day of Ardeth's disappearance. However, he denied involvement in the girl's murder. There was insufficient evidence against him, so the suspect was released but placed under surveillance. A few weeks later, he was invited for questioning again. The detectives had gathered a lot of information about him and carefully prepared their questions. They also suggested the young man take a polygraph test. The suspect agreed and easily passed all the tests. The police couldn't believe it but had to let him go, dropping all suspicions. The investigation had reached a dead end. The Ottawa police announced a $50,000 reward for any information that would help solve the case. It was the largest amount law enforcement had ever offered under similar circumstances. Soon, about 5,000 calls with leads came in, which the police began to check. One portion of information mentioned the name Christopher Myers, which caught the investigators' attention. It turned out he had previous convictions for selling prohibited substances. Colleagues described 25-year-old Chris as a quiet, non-confrontational, and even inconspicuous guy who worked as a janitor. His face was remarkably similar to the composite sketch of the suspect. Moreover, he had the same beard. The police were delighted, thinking they had finally found the right man. But it turned out Christopher had an alibi for the day of Ardeth's disappearance. The landlady of the apartment he was renting claimed that on August 6, 2003, the young man was at home in the morning and then went to work at a restaurant. This surprised the police because a year had already passed. How could the woman remember the details of that day so clearly? Another problem arose. Christopher didn't have an eagle tattoo on his shoulder, although witnesses insisted they had seen this tattoo on him. Maybe he had it removed. The detectives were convinced this was the person they needed and had to prove it. A few weeks later, another similar attack occurred. In the evening, a girl who closely resembled Ardeth was walking alone across a bridge when she heard someone walking behind her. Turning around, she saw an attractive man on a bicycle. The girl had no intention of making acquaintances or talking and asked to be left alone. The man rode past her, and just as she sighed with relief, the stranger turned his bicycle around and rushed straight at her. There was no one around who could help. The attacker jumped off his bike and forcibly dragged the victim into the bushes. The girl screamed very loudly, which seemed to frighten the assailant. He fled. The victim went to the police. Other investigators took on this case. Everyone assumed it was an attempted robbery, and the detectives investigating Ardeth's disappearance found out about the incident much later. In May, another attack occurred on a tall blonde woman similar to the missing person. The girl was returning late in the evening from a party when a stranger approached her and tried to strike up a conversation. She asked to be left alone. Then he started asking for help, claiming he was lost. The girl explained where he should go, and he left. She breathed a sigh of relief, but literally 10 minutes later, he attacked her from the bushes. The assailant furiously began strangling her, twisting her neck. At that moment, the girl thought it was the end, but she continued to resist, screaming, hitting him, biting. Her screams attracted the attention of the residents of the building who came out to see what was happening. This frightened the criminal and he fled, but this time he made a serious mistake. In his haste, he dropped his phone. Investigators established that the mobile belonged to Christopher Myers, whom they suspected in the Ardeth murder case. The puzzle came together. Chris committed all the similar crimes. He chose girls with similar appearances, blondes, and attacked them. Christopher was brought in for questioning, but he wasn't in a hurry to confess to the murder. He said he had never been to Green Creek, had never seen Ardeth, and wasn't involved in the other attacks. Chris complained about mental health issues and uncontrollable aggression, but insisted he hadn't caused physical harm to anyone. The detectives noticed he had crooked teeth and persuaded him to take a polygraph test. The test lasted 5 hours, and Chris failed it miserably. But despite this, he still continued to claim his innocence, saying the polygraph was wrong. Since the results of the lie detector test weren't considered evidence, the suspect had to be released. For the next 5 months, detectives gathered evidence against him, interrogating everyone who knew Christopher: relatives, friends, colleagues, and his ex-girlfriend. It turned out Christopher was born into a dysfunctional family of alcoholics. His difficult childhood was accompanied by the development of various mental disorders, attention deficit disorder, and schizoid disorder. Chris was taken from his birth family and adopted by another couple. The adoptive parents treated the boy with love, but he was uncontrollable. They couldn't cope with raising the troubled child and returned him to the orphanage when Chris turned 12. As he grew older, he seemed to become an ordinary, normal guy. Christopher graduated from school, entered university, socialized with friends, and lived in a dormitory. But his roommate considered Chris abnormal. He told creepy stories that frightened her. Eventually, she kicked him out of the room. Chris's ex-girlfriend revealed that he loved cycling along the trails of Ottawa and was fascinated by the picturesque scenery. She also disclosed his main secret. Christopher enjoyed temporary tattoos. For a while, he had the exact image of an eagle on his shoulder. The girl was shown a sketch of the tattoo, and she confirmed that he had the same one on his left shoulder. Christopher was summoned for questioning on October 13, 2005. He was placed in a very cramped interrogation room. This time, the conversation was conducted by burly men who pushed their chairs right up against Chris. All this put tremendous psychological pressure on the suspect. The investigators started with simple words. "We know everything about you, Chris. We know it was you who killed Ardeth." Christopher responded evasively. 3 hours later, he began to give testimony, confused and inconsistent. Chris admitted that he was in Green Creek that day and met Ardeth. Struck by her beauty, he decided to get acquainted. He started giving compliments, chatting nicely, and then invited the girl into the woods, and she agreed. Once there, Christopher began hugging and kissing her, showing the detectives exactly how. And then, according to him, it all ended. Ardeth recoiled from him. Apparently, she didn't like his manners. She ran away but fell into the creek. Christopher tried to save the girl but failed. He wanted to portray himself as a hero, but this absolutely didn't correspond to his subsequent actions. For some reason, he pulled Ardeth's body out of the water, undressed it, and buried it. When the policeman stated that Chris was going to be charged with murder, he immediately retracted his words. "No, I never met her. It was a joke. I took all the information from the newspapers." The detective had to have a serious one-on-one conversation with him. Eventually, Chris confessed to killing Ardeth. He even drew a map with the trails in Green Creek where he met the girl. On it, he marked another person, Laura, who saw him with the victim in the forest. Laura recognized the suspect as the same man she had seen then. Christopher was arrested on October 20th, 2005. He agreed to go to the crime scene to recreate the events. But when they arrived at the indicated trail, Christopher suddenly declared that it wasn't the right location, claiming everything happened elsewhere, although everything matched. Christopher had an unstable psyche. He would give testimony and then retract his words. Later, he also confessed to other attacks on girls. He was charged with additional crimes for these offenses. At the trial, the lawyer stated that Christopher was just a troubled young man. At first, the accused denied his previous confessions, but later, on the advice of his defense attorney, he decided to make a deal with the investigation and plead guilty. On January 8, 2008, 5 years after the murder, the defendant confessed to the crime but refused to disclose the motives and details. Later, he also admitted to the other attacks. The prosecution believed that on that day, Chris wasn't on the forest trail by chance. He was stalking his prey like a hunter. He attacked several girls who were lucky enough to escape. The likely motive was sexual assault. Ardeth was unlucky that day. She was Christopher's type, an attractive blonde. He tried to get acquainted with her, but something went wrong, and an argument broke out between them, which was overheard by a teenage girl riding by. Under some pretext, the killer managed to lure Ardeth into the woods. There, he attacked her, started undressing her, intending to rape her. To save herself, the girl ran away and jumped into the creek. Chris rushed after her, caught up, and drowned her, then buried the body. The victim's parents agreed with the prosecution's version. According to them, Ardeth was a good swimmer and couldn't have drowned in the creek. In their opinion, the defendant deliberately drowned the girl. However, it remained a mystery to them how Christopher managed to convince Ardeth to go into the woods with him. As part of the deal with the investigation, Christopher pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a right to parole only after 10 years. In 2020, he filed a relevant petition, but the commission rejected it, recognizing the high risk of repeated crimes against women. In 2007, a plaque in memory of Ardeth was installed on one of the centuries-old oaks in Green Creek Park. And in 2017, during a powerful thunderstorm, just like on the day of Amurda, lightning struck the same tree. The oak suffered serious damage, and experts didn't believe it would survive. But a miracle happened. The mighty tree withstood. It still grows as a living monument to the girl who was killed nearby. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jared Bridegan. Jared J. Bridegan was born in 1989 in Florida into a modest family where he was the second of 2 sons. He grew up alongside his older brother Adam. They were practically inseparable from childhood. Their parents were devout members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. As a teenager, Jared met a girl named Mallory Bowden at church. The two developed a romantic relationship, and Bowden would later refer to Jared as her first true love. However, their relationship never led to marriage, since cohabitation was discouraged within their religious community. Divorces can sometimes take dark turns with tragic outcomes. Jared Bridegan's story is an example where former partners became bitter enemies, leading to catastrophic results for both families involved and their children left behind. When Jared graduated from a Florida Arts High School in 2007 and decided to continue his education in another state, they went their separate ways. Jared moved to Utah, where he enrolled in college and met his future first wife in 9. At the age of 20, Jared Bridegan encountered a woman named Shanana Gardner at a friend's birthday party. She was 2 years older and came from a well-off family. She was also a member of the Use of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Shanana was born in 1987. Her parents, Starling and Shelley Gardner, were co-founders of a major company called Stampin' Up, specializing in the production and sale of decorative craft items. By 2010, it was reported that their family business, headquartered in Salt Lake City, was generating annual revenue of $100 million. Shanana has a sister named Sarah, who currently holds a managerial position in the family business. Growing up in such an affluent family, Shanana enjoyed a life of luxury and leisure without ever needing to work in her trained profession as a chef. She was described as enthusiastic and somewhat capricious. Initially, according to sources mentioned earlier, Jared wasn't particularly interested in his new acquaintance. Nevertheless, Shanana made significant efforts to entice him with her lavish lifestyle, suggesting they could travel the world together and live freely, since her parents would financially support them. Family life progressed swiftly with the birth of twins, just a few months after their first meeting. The couple got engaged quickly, and by early 2010, less than a year after they met, they celebrated an extravagant wedding in a temple in Salt Lake City, Utah. The Gardner family covered all expenses for both ceremony and reception. This rapid progression towards marriage was influenced by their religious beliefs that disapproved of cohabitation and lengthy engagements. Following their wedding, the newlyweds settled in Utah. Here, the bride's parents assisted them in purchasing a comfortable home valued at approximately $1 million. Each had their own Mercedes, despite Jared still being a student at the time and Shanana not working at all. The couple traveled extensively worldwide, sharing numerous photos of their exciting trips, expensive purchases, and leisure activities on social media profiles. According to close acquaintances, Shauna's parents provided the couple approximately $10,000 monthly for various expenses and granted them access to their accounts. When Jared completed his degree, his in-laws generously gave him $100,000 to start his own. In 2013, the couple welcomed twins, a daughter named Abigail and a son named Liam. The family relocated to Connecticut temporarily, but soon after, Liam was diagnosed with a heart condition and lung issues. Doctors recommended moving closer to the sea for the child's health benefits. Consequently, the family moved to Florida and purchased a comfortable 2-story home near the coastline at Ponte Vedra Beach, south of Jacksonville. At this time, Shauna actively managed her social media blog, portraying herself as a loving wife, a caring mother of twins, a professional chef, and an individual passionate about travel and sports. She took fitness seriously and frequented the gym nearly every day. Observing her dedication, Jared decided to surprise her by hiring a personal trainer. The scandalous divorce started shortly after this move. Clear issues began surfacing in the marriage, even though the couple pretended everything was fine. Shauna became disillusioned with their religion and nearly stopped attending church services, while her husband remained a devout member. This difference in religious commitment led to frequent arguments and tension. Reportedly, Shauna also felt disillusioned with Jared, as she perceived him to be lazy, having gained weight and only half-heartedly attempting to get his business off the ground. After completing online courses in programming and design, Jared secured a position at Microsoft, where he began earning independently. A few years later, he advanced to a senior manager role. However, the couple continued to grow increasingly distant. Arguments became routine in their household. The situation worsened when Jared accidentally discovered intimate exchanges between his wife and her personal fitness trainer. According to several sources, Shanana allegedly had an affair, which the trainer confirmed in a phone conversation with Jared. However, Shanana strongly denied these claims. Jared later contacted Mela Bowden via email, expressing concern that his wife had become distant and emotionally attached to her gym trainer. Despite this, he showed a willingness to forgive the infidelity in order to keep their family together for the sake of their children. In 2015, after nearly 6 years of marriage, the couple began a contentious and scandalous divorce process. They disagreed over shared assets and custody rights for their children in a far from amicable manner. Jared accused his ex-wife publicly of infidelity, which she categorically denied, stating that the marriage had merely lost its love. In response, she accused him of cruelty and offensive behavior. Shanana was firm about not dividing their home, cars, and bank account funds. She argued that nearly everything they had acquired over the years was bought or gifted by her parents. Jared had only started working less than a year prior. Before this, he focused on his studies and unsuccessfully tried to establish his business using funds from his in-laws. Jared contested her viewpoint, claiming at least half of their Florida home. Custody of the twins also led to numerous disputes. Shanana alleged that whenever Jared was with the children, he tried to turn them against her. He supposedly coached them on what to say about their mother and recorded their statements to present in court. Jared countered by accusing his ex-wife of comprehensive surveillance, installing hidden cameras in their home, tapping his phone calls, and placing a tracker in his car to monitor his movements. Shanana sought sole custody of the children and exclusive ownership of their seaside home. She also claimed Jared threatened to withdraw all the money from their children's trust funds for his personal use. Jared responded with allegations that Shanana evaded taxes by working off the books at her parents' company and receiving tens of thousands of dollars this way. New families, old disputes. By the end of 2015, the court had mandated joint custody of the children, but that hardly put an end to the disputes between Jared and Shanana. Even after their divorce was officially finalized, they continued to meet in court for nearly 7 more years. This led up to the tragic conclusion of their saga. By this time, both had moved on to start new families, have more children. In 2016, Jared met a woman named Christina, a fellow Microsoft employee who lived and worked in North Carolina. Initially, their interactions were strictly professional. However, they gradually grew closer, and a few months later, Christina moved to Florida to be with Jared. In the fall of 2017, they married, and by February 2019, they welcomed their first child together, a daughter named Bexley. In August 2021, their son London was born. Shanana also remarried in 2018, tying the knot with Mario Fernandez, a man a year her junior, who owned a real estate business. That same year, they welcomed their son Michael. The family resided in the same house where Shanana had lived with her first husband Jared. This house had been a battleground in their court disputes. The presence of new families didn't calm the waters between the ex-spouses, who continued to file lawsuits against each other with new demands. Jared insisted that Shana's new husband Mario should not be allowed to be with the twins if their mother was absent. Conversely, he wanted his new wife Christina to be fully involved in the upbringing of his older children. The last court meeting between Jared and Shanana occurred 4 months before Jared's death, and it was exceptionally tense. They exchanged another round of mutual accusations and contested rights to their property. Shanana claimed that Jared was preventing her from using the family's larger, more comfortable vehicle for transporting the children because he was more concerned with humiliating her than with the convenience and safety of his own children. At this point, the court granted Shanana exclusive rights to use the larger vehicle and ordered Jared to pay her $600 in compensation. For agreement between the ex-spouses, Jared picked up the twins on Wednesdays for a family dinner, including their younger sister Bexley. Christina sometimes joined them, but after the birth of London, she spent most of her time with the newborn, choosing not to leave him with babysitters. On Wednesday, February 22nd, 2022, Jared followed his usual routine. He took the children to a coastal after picking them up. After dinner and a stroll, he returned the twins to their mother's house before heading home on his regular. The trip typically took about 40 minutes, including a deserted stretch of road without streetlights. While driving slowly and cautiously, aware of his 3-year-old daughter asleep in her car seat, Jared encountered an unexpected obstacle around 9 p.m. Suddenly, in the headlights, he saw a tire lying in his lane. He stopped, activated his hazard lights, and got out to move the tire to the side of the road. It was at this moment that gunshots rang out. Jared had no chance to escape. The assailant fired several bullets at close range before fleeing the scene. Thankfully, the child dozing in the car was unharmed. A passerby nearby heard the shots and cautiously approached, discovering Jared lying in a pool of blood. They immediately called police and paramedics, but tragically, it was too late to save him. Regarding the investigation and initial suspicions, Christina called her husband just minutes before the incident. He told her he had just dropped off the children and would be home in about 15 minutes. However, as 30 minutes turned into an hour, with no sign of Jared and no answer on his phone, Christina repeatedly tried calling him until she finally received an answer from a police officer who informed her of what had happened and requested her immediate presence at the Jacksonville Beach police station. The investigation team determined that the tire in the road caused Jared's vehicle to stop. They concluded he exited his car to remove it, but was then shot. His 3-year-old daughter remained unharmed in the car, indicating she wasn't the target. Additionally, no valuables were missing from Jared's vehicle. A wallet with cash, a phone, and a tablet were left untouched, dismissing robbery as a motive. The theory of robbery arose almost immediately when inquiries were made about whether her husband had any known adversaries, antagonists, or recent disputes. Christina stated that she was unaware of wishing harm upon her husband, aside from his first wife, Shana. However, she refrained from making direct accusations without indisputable evidence. The police reported a lack of surveillance footage due to the absence of cameras along the stretch of road where the incident occurred. A witness who heard the shots claimed that they broke the quiet of the night without being preceded by screeching brakes loud screams, or any other sounds. They did hear a vehicle speeding away, though nothing was visible in the darkness. Christina's suggestion of Shana's involvement in the crime seemed plausible to investigators, though it was unlikely she acted directly, especially given her solid alibi. She was at home with her husband, twins, younger son, and parents who were visiting. The police decided to check nearby surveillance cameras. The footage showed an old dark blue Ford F-150 with brown trim entering the area about 15 minutes before the incident and leaving a few minutes after the shots were reported by the witness. Detectives turned to the public for assistance in identifying this vehicle of interest. Jared's family made televised appeals urging anyone with even minor information related to the case to come forward. The first suspects arrested, Shana and her current husband Mario, were repeatedly questioned but vehemently denied any involvement in the murder. Shana did not hide that her relationship with her ex-husband was complicated, but insisted that she would never wish harm upon the father of her children. She also shared with media outlets how their 9-year-old twins reacted to news of their father's death. Abigail cried uncontrollably for hours, while Liam remained in shock and silent for an extended period. It is worth noting that neither Shana nor Jared's older children attended his funeral. Christina informed Shana that her presence at the farewell ceremony would be highly unwelcome, to which Shana responded that if she wasn't allowed to attend, the twins would not attend the burial either. It wasn't until January 2023, nearly a year after Mr. Brand's murder, that the first suspect was arrested. The police remained silent about the investigation's progress, simply noting that it required considerable resources and effort. An exhaustive search for the dark blue Ford F-150 finally bore fruit when the vehicle got involved in an accident, but left before the police arrived. This incident occurred in a crowded area with many witnesses, making it easier to identify the offender on the same day thanks to numerous camera recordings. The car belonged to 62-year-old Henry Tynan, an unemployed man with prior convictions. He faced charges of second-degree premeditated murder using a firearm, participation in a criminal conspiracy with intent to commit murder, and setting up an ambush with obstructions for the victim. Jacksonville Beach Police Chief Jonathan Paul Smith and City Prosecutor Melissa Nelson announced these charges during a press conference. They also revealed that Tynan did not act alone and was cooperating by giving testimony against his accomplices. However, no other names were disclosed at that time to protect the integrity of the ongoing investigation. Understanding the severity of his charges and the lengthy prison term he faced, Tynan chose to cooperate with law enforcement in hopes that his cooperation would be viewed favorably during sentencing and possibly reduce his punishment. Inside information soon leaked to the press, indicating that Tynan had been renting a small house owned by Mario Fernandez, along with a friend. Fernandez's housemate was also questioned, but failed to provide any valuable information about the case, as he had no personal dealings with Fernandez. He merely passed his share of rent through Henry. Following an extensive search of the house, authorities discovered a concealed pistol in the accused's room. Ballistic tests later confirmed that this weapon was used in the murder, further implicating Tynan in the crime. On March 16, 2023, Mario Fernandez was arrested after Tynan pleaded guilty and agreed to testify against Mario. Tynan identified Mario as the contractor of the crime. Consequently, Fernandez faced charges of first-degree murder, criminal conspiracy, and incitement to commit a serious crime. Rumors circulated that Shanana was the mastermind behind the murder. This was corroborated by her former lover, a fitness trainer, who recounted how she had frequently expressed disdain for her then-husband and wished for his death. A tattoo artist who regularly saw Shanana also testified. She remembered Shanana complaining about her constant legal battles with her ex-husband and expressing a desire to silence him permanently. Initially thought to be a grim joke, Shanana later reiterated her request, signaling her serious intent. Shanana Gardner Fernandez categorically denied all allegations against her. She declared her intention to remain in town and assist with the investigation. However, shortly after her husband's arrest, she relocated to Washington with their twins and youngest son. On August 17, 2023, she faced identical charges as her current husband when she was arrested at her Washington apartment and extradited to Florida to stand trial together with the criminal trio. The motive behind Shanana's alleged actions included complex relationships with her ex-husband, a desire to avoid joint custody of their 2 children, and ambition to solely possess all disputed assets. The case remains ongoing, with continued legal proceedings against all involved conspirators. Tenon has pleaded guilty to all charges and is actively cooperating with investigators in hopes of receiving leniency. Reports indicate that he is facing at least 15 years in prison, a significant duration given his advanced age, potentially equating to a life sentence. Mario Fernandez has partially admitted his guilt, but has exercised his legal rights by refusing to testify against his wife, Shanana Gardner Fernandez. Despite vehemently denying all charges against her, prosecutors are pursuing either the death penalty or life imprisonment without parole for both. Currently, Shanana's 3 children are under the care of their maternal grandparents, Starling and Shelley Gardner, along with their aunt Sarah.